Hey everyone, guess what? We do not have ugly swag. We have spaced out radio gear that you're going to want to wear. Why? Because no one wants to wear ugly clothing. So head on over to spacedoutradio.com and go shopping today. You'll be glad you did. And it's a great way to support our show. Once you get your gear, send us a picture of you rocking out in your SOR swag. spacedoutradio.com, shop there today, and make yourself look good.
Welcome, everyone, to Spaced Out Radio, the After Hours radio show with me, your host, Mr. Rob G. We are going to have an awesome show tonight. It's going to be totally awesome. We have Reed Summers joining us, and we're going to be getting into the other side of the conversation. What's the actual alien intent? Why are they here? Right? We talked about love and light. We talked about all the positive things to look forward to potentially with this alien presence, but what about the other side of it? There is the other side, at least to consider, right? There's definitely another side to consider, and I can't wait to jump into this conversation. You know, I've been waiting for a while, so we finally got it here tonight, and I hope all you guys sit back and enjoy the show. Let me go ahead and see who has come in, got the medal positions tonight. As far as I can tell, and I checked the email, I didn't get a race fan email, so first person that I see here getting the gold is Paul N, saying, looking forward to this. Me too, Paul N. We got Kitty Catty Whack with the silver, with the peace emoji, and we got Jerry Carter with the bronze, saying I'd say it's certain high-pitched frequencies, like, say, a high-pitched squeal, like a woman laughing all over the TV. Okay, you might be experiencing something there. That's what it sounds like. We're going to be getting into some awesome stuff. Let me try to get as many people listed as possible. Matt Carter, thanks for coming in. Eternal. Roger Murray dropping this knowledge on us. September 21st, 1950, actor, comic Bill Murray, 74th birthday. And then Roger Murray's 52nd birthday. Happy birthday to Roger Murray as we go ahead and get into the show. Who else do we have? Melvin WD-40 getting us all lubed up, ready to get into the show. As always, we got Road Flare in the building. Hey, Road Flare. We got Nam Lee. We got Drew Banky in the back, as Drew Banky will be joining us for hour 3 with the wrap-up. It's going to be awesome tonight. Who else do we have? Carl Bittner. Hey, Carl Bittner, thanks for coming on in. Let's hurry up and get as many people as possible before we start the podcast side of this. We got Eternal. I said Eternity. We got Richard Minnick. We got Miss Catherine Jones in the building. We got Cody Eiler. Hey, Cody. We got Lil Cam 51 over there on Twitch joining us for this awesome conversation tonight. We got Scott B. We got, who else do we have? Aloha Dave is in the building. Aloha Dave. Thanks for coming on in. We got Sarah Lynn Oliver. Thanks for joining us tonight. And Jessica S. Jessica S is here. Thanks for joining us tonight. And that was pretty quick. So we're going to get ready to get into this show, get this thing started. So I will go ahead and start the podcast side of this. And then we'll get ready to start the radio side of this. So here we go. Welcome to Spaced Out Radio. I'm your host, Mr. Rob G. Tonight is going to be an awesome show. We have Reed Summers joining us, talking about alien intent for hours 1 and 2. And then hour 3, we got Drew Banke coming in with the wrap up. We have Steve Stockton, Missing Persons Mysteries. And then we have another Unapologetically Mr. Rob G, because there were some things that were brought to my attention this weekend, and I just got something to say about it. So we'll be doing that here as we get ready to jump into the radio side of this. Here we go. Greetings, space travelers. Welcome home. You just tuned your dial to Spaced Out Radio, the only place where you can own the night. I am your host, Mr. Rob G, and tonight we're broadcasting to you on our terrestrial affiliates across North America and digitally on digital platforms all around the world. Don't forget, you can follow us at Instagram and X at Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Radio Show. While you're there, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Also, jump into our archives, youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. We have options that are endless there. You can actually go to our website as well, spacedoutradio.com, where you can check in on the SOR Newswire, get some official Spaced Out swag. Plus, you can actually rock out to the guy you hear right there, Mr. Bumblefoot, and oh, so much more. Like I said, it's going to be a really awesome show tonight. We're going to be talking about what is the alien intent. It's a very important topic and something that we're definitely going to be covering tonight as we go ahead and get ready to bring in our guest for the night. I want to go ahead and give him a proper introduction. Reed Summers' body of work sheds lights on the activities and agenda of the alien visitation occurring in the world and what is increasingly acknowledged as an alien intervention into human affairs. Reed Summers presents critical information that unravels the mystery of why these beings are here, their actions, and the overarching purpose that propels their involvement in our world. Reed Summers is also a teacher of a curriculum for developing the greater capabilities of a human spiritual intelligence and applying these capabilities to meeting the growing environmental, social, and political challenges we face, as well as to the frontiers of interaction between human beings and non-human extraterrestrial intelligence from beyond our world. And we're not going to waste any time. We're going to go ahead and jump right into the show and bring in our guest for the evening, Mr. Reed Summers. Hi, Reed. How are you this evening?
Hey, Rob. Good to be with you. Thank you.
Oh, man. Like I said, it's awesome having you here. Everyone knows here for the last few weeks, I've been pumping this show up saying we got Reed Summers coming. This is going to be a real important conversation to have. So everyone's been anticipating your arrival, and we finally got you here. So I'm just glad that we can go ahead and jump into the conversation. So I did want to start out, Reed. Obviously everyone has different paths when it comes to getting into this field and the reasons why they did. What I guess first led you into the world of ufology? Did you have anything growing up, any experiences, or kind of what directed your path here?
Yeah, long journey. Much of my life has indirectly or directly been involved in this phenomenon and all of the side phenomena associated with it. My family has been involved in the process of considering what the intent of non-human intelligence might be going back all the way to the 60s. My uncle was primary contractor working with George Van Tassel on the developments at Giant Rock in California. It's going way back into the legacy era. My mother was a spiritual practitioner of great depth, working with many spiritual teachers in her early years. And she felt called from the very beginning to explore the intersection between our human spiritual sensing ability, what you might call a noetic ability, or a higher level of consciousness, and the ability to apply that to perceiving accurately the visitation by non-human entities in the form of an extraterrestrial visitor. And she would ultimately meet my father, who was an accomplished spiritual teacher and a receiver of telepathic information, Marshall Summers, who has received a pretty large body of work on this topic. And together, they would explore deeper, perhaps, than most folks you might ever meet, giving much of their adult lives, professional lives, to focusing on this. So I grew up in an environment where this was dinner table conversation. The likelihood of an extraterrestrial visitation was right there on the table for me to consider growing up from a very early age. Definitely had some anomalous encounter experiences, some sighting events in my life, which further kind of confirmed the reality behind this. And, my journey took me off into the world. I traveled extensively, lived in the Middle East for a time for work and study, was able to go to 40 different countries and for a variety of purposes, ultimately settled at a career at a national federally funded lab focused on atmospheric science here in Colorado, where I was for 12 years. And, I left last summer out of, honestly, this sense of something of a UFO calling, which I don't think is unique to me. I think many people are sensing that this is about to erupt into world consciousness to a greater degree than ever before through disclosure. And they are involved. They have to be, they have to be present for this ontological, philosophical, spiritual, and truly prosaic interface that we seem to be having with this phenomenon. So I felt called into that. And so I've been focusing a greater amount of my time and energy on this. And, I write and speak often. I'm working on a book on this topic and a number of other projects, which I hope to bring forward. So it's been a long road. But, basically my inspiration is I've been exposed to a lot of this multivaried, confusing, shape-shifting manifestation of the phenomenon associated with NHI. And I have found it necessary to develop grounded, logical ways of thinking through this phenomenon. How does one think through this with so much obfuscation, so much secrecy, so much deception by human and non-human actors? And what are the most important things to consider as you think through it? Like, what are the high points, the mile markers in this unknown landscape that we seem to be traversing? And over many years, I've developed through a framework I have, which basically, in the shortest way to describe it, is going from possibilities to probabilities to starting assessment, and then to a working conclusion. Well, my starting assessment, I like to give to people because I think it helps in their formation of an assessment. It kind of gives them a benchmark to square theirs up against, or to find theirs, different from. So can do that today as well.
Yes, awesome stuff there. So, okay, so looking into this, growing up with the family where it was totally into this is actually pretty awesome. I can only imagine what like the dinner conversations were like. But when you get into like your friends, right, at school, being that young and being so involved in the conversation, was this ever anything that you would talk to your friends about, or was the stigma just so strong that you shied away from it?
I definitely had those few conversations, those select moments, as I'm sure many of us have had with the receptive person. But no, I mean, growing up in middle class America, pre 9/11, those were the fat, dumb, and happy years of American prosperity and affluence, or affluenza, as we might call it. And so, no, there was not a lot of awareness on this topic. And of course, with every major UFO documentary going back to Into the Blue by James Fox, which was that was an event of the year back when that was released, right? So we're living in different times now, and I've had since, as I've really stepped into this more fully, I've had this conversation about who are they, what are they, why are they, what are the probable explanations for why they're here? How should we approach this field of vast possibilities and distill it down to some working probabilities that reflect what we can know about the universe, about species interaction, and about ourselves. I've had that conversation with hundreds and hundreds of people in almost every socioeconomic, cultural, political, religious setting I can imagine out in the world. And so I've enjoyed those conversations, thinking through this together. And I really feel that most people are in a much better position than we may think they are to have that conversation, to entertain the possibility of a non-human physical alien visitation and its implications for the human species. I don't know. I mean, my rough estimate would be 90% of the people I talk to can go there. And when they go there, they can think through it in a relatively grounded fashion. My concern is in the UFO community, the community of people who have taken the deep dive, the level of confusion and the dichotomies that have formed and that have kind of entrapped people's cognitive process and critical thinking abilities are profound. And so that says to me, someone is really trying to impede a logical conversation about this phenomenon, and is trying to kind of capture the audience of people who have the highest level of interest and need and calling even, and really prevent them from making progress in that cognitive process. So that's what I look forward to. And I've had those conversations with a lot of folks, and I look forward to more of it.
Yes, yes, very important to have as well. So just kind of looking at this and starting out, because I don't like to only speak to an audience that are quote unquote UFO believers. I like to bring skeptics into the conversation too, at least the ones with the open minds, because I've always said there's a within this field, on both sides of the conversation, you have a subset of people who are what you would consider extreme believers, who just will believe anything that you say, and without questioning it or challenging it. Then you have on the opposite side skeptics that just are extreme skeptics and just don't want to believe. They believe in not believing, essentially. And
Right.
so, I like having those open-minded people come to the conversation. If you were to look back on some of UFO history and kind of point to maybe one or two events that, if you were going to speak to a skeptic to kind of show them, hey, there might be something more to this, it's something you could look into, what would be a couple of those sightings that you would point to?
Roswell, Phoenix Lights, Colaris, some of these incidents with numerous, in some cases hundreds of corroborating witnesses, many of them highly credible, many of them government, military, law enforcement, with multiple photographic, video, or sensor data capture to back that up, and highly researched, thoroughly vetted, numerous witnesses with testimony captured. So incidents like those, I think, suggest that, well, first off, the government in this country, the US government, has demonstrated, has come out very plainly to say, we are interested and concerned.
Yeah.
We do not know, and there is something here. I mean, this is former CIA directors, former directors of national intelligence. We have credentialed people with access to programs that would be involved, basically saying, yes, there is something there, and indicating that they are unable to get access to it, to know what's inside of those sealed, compartmentalized programs. And then, I mean, the list goes on. I mean, all the statements that have been made recently, obviously by Lou Elizondo, Dave Grush, former director of the CIA, Admiral Hillenkotter, Paul Hellyer, other major government officials, basically corroborating that there is a there. So in my view, what UFO research has substantiated over the past 80 years are a number of things. One is that we have a hard, observable, physical phenomenon taking place in our skies, on land, and in our oceans, which in all likelihood, much more probably than not, is of non-Earth origin. It is demonstrating capabilities well beyond those that any known state actor would have at that specific time in history, or in the last 100 years. So we have a hard physical phenomenon. We have not just objects that are transiting our atmosphere in linear pathways. We have craft that are under some form of control. And I would add intelligent control. They are adaptive, they are evasive, they are anticipatory, they interact with the human controller of, the craft in the sky, the sea, ship on the ground, or the individual in their bedroom at night. And so, going down from that hard physical surface level of the phenomena, if you take the analogy of the iceberg, right, there's what you can see at the surface, a little bit, there's what you can see in the subsurface. But then based upon those two, there's what you can infer exists well below the subsurface, what is really truly out of view for most of us. And that's what the deep of the phenomenon is, in my view, that we might infer is there. And based upon the way these craft are operating around civilian sites, military sites, nuclear assets, the way that crashed vehicles are being recovered, not just recovered because they were randomly fell out of the sky or were downed, but because they might have been intentionally placed on the ground for us to find. Some signal or some indication that agreements have been made with government to transact for technologies in exchange for what, right? And then we have this abduction phenomenon, this human NHI interface, which took off toward the end of the 20th century, and has, by all appearances, due to the corroborating nature of reports from people all around the world in almost every cultural setting, people with no media access, people reporting this well before, the craze and, of memes and so forth related to contact, reporting very similar entities, very similar encounters, procedures, craft. So that's the deep. I think we can begin to infer that there is a human abduction phenomenon. So I know I'm kind of going into the whole of it here, but those are some of the high points that I would highlight.
Well, and let me ask you this, Reed, because you mentioned a couple of those historic cases like the Roswell. And I would say with Roswell, they said in the beginning, their initial statement was, we have recovered a crashed disc. So that was the truth right there. They told you the truth. But, here's what I'm wondering, just from your perspective. Why do you think, with so much evidence out there that should really seal the deal, for a lot of people, they still question the evidence. They still can't wrap their mind around, wow, okay, let me be open-minded and consider the fact that this may have actually happened. Why do you think people are so, not willing to embrace the evidence?
Sure. I mean, multi-layered reason for that, multi-layered reality behind that. I ask folks a lot, what is your need to know about this phenomenon? And a lot of people raise their hand like, oh yeah, I need to know. Okay. What is your will to know? And I'll tell you, at that moment in the audience, some hands go down, and there's kind of a half gasp, half sigh in the room where people are like, I don't know if I want to know. Do I really want to know how deep this goes and how dark it might be? Yeah. And what this might ultimately represent for the human species? I'm not sure, right? And I respect that. I really do. But outside of the need to know audience and the will to know audience is the broad public, who may not yet have a need to know. In fact, they may have a need to not know. And in part, that's because the paradigm in which they operate, in which they get up every day and reason through, the cost-benefit analysis of their life, what they give over to their employer in exchange for happiness and fulfillment. And right, it's like everything that underlies that would be fundamentally changed by the realization of this event, that this event would precipitate for them. And that's earth-shaking. I respect that. And that's why it is important to onboard people slowly, as has been happening, to this reality, and avoid something of a mass panic event, which certainly could ensue, right? There are real societal implications of too much too soon, too far. But as for the evidence, I mean, I kind of view the argument for hard evidence as a soft argument, right? Because first off, who holds the evidence, right? Those are the keys. Those are the keys to public consciousness. Because hard evidence, which is literal bodies, body cam footage, actual pieces of metal, pieces of the interior of a craft, what that would do to the evidential requirements of the largest number of people is phenomenal, right? And who has such evidence that we all say we want so much, right? It's the very gatekeepers who we are in some sort of Cold War with, it seems. And so this demand for hard evidence places the power and the mechanisms to control the process of disclosure right back in the hands of the people who have it. And it also presumes that these powers, whatever they are, defense contractors, deep elements of three-letter agencies, are the ones who hold the answer to contact itself, the meaning. Who are they? What does it mean for us? What are we actually encountering? We assume they know. They could be very deluded. They could be very misled or misguided. They could be manipulated as well. And so we bang on the door of the Pentagon wanting these scraps of their interface with the phenomenon, when the truth is the phenomenon has been interfacing with individual human beings for probably almost 40 years or long, or well, probably the whole time. But I think the bulk evidence that would help us understand the intent of the visitor exists in the broader public. It definitely exists in the deeper state, deeper elements of this government, my government, other governments too. However, we shouldn't mistake this as USG and NHI. The NHI are, I think, interested in the world, the attributes of this planet, its resource attributes, and us as a species. So, but we might have a misplaced center of controversy if we think the US government is the one who has managed and manipulated this entirely. Because as we'll get into, I think there is a parallel secrecy and a parallel cover-up that originates with non-human actors.
Yes, we are going to get into that good stuff. And I'm actually, I'm one, and I'm just listening to you because I already, when I saw you on the interview, I'm like, yeah, he speaks the same language that I speak as far as this goes. And I always tell people here that there are two sides to this. There's a government-controlled disclosure process that you can choose to waste your time with, or there's a humanity-led disclosure, which is, when I compare the two, I tell people, I'm like, we have pretty much all the evidence that they have minus the craft in the bodies, but we have actually everything else when it comes to that. So, I guess we can jump into, as we got about 1 minute here, 2 minutes before break. There had been, and I guess this will get into what you were just speaking about, but I just had Laura Eisenhower on the show a few weeks ago. Awesome lady. And obviously her great grandfather's president, Dwight Eisenhower. And, there was rumors that there were some sort of meetings that took place. She states that that's not true, but that doesn't mean that there weren't meetings with other government officials on other levels. What do you think about that aspect of it? And as we got about 45 seconds to go.
There's a lot of anecdotal indications that discussions have occurred, that interactions have taken place. If you want to touch a deep element to that, which has been corroborated to me personally by someone formerly high up in government who would know, is the account in Project Preserve Destiny. Last name of the author is Sherman. And so basically the preparation of intuitive communicators by the NSA to facilitate the abduction program as orchestrated by the non-human intelligence. Read that book. If that's true, wow. Tell me there's not been an agreement. Oh, there's much more than an agreement. There's been a collaboration. But the question is who's marching to whose beat? We assume that the government is the actor, the bad actor, and the NHR are the neutral, or maybe even the beneficials who are being kept at bay from us being able to access them. I would challenge that assumption. And I do not think there is enough in the observed record to substantiate it.
Well, that's great, because we're going to actually be jumping into that right after this break. But when it comes down to it, it's great that we're able to have these conversations, because we'll never get the direct information from the government. So it's kind of cool to be able to put forth theories and kind of think through, just like you stated, have a process where you kind of just run down a rabbit hole and see what the outcome of that is. But we'll be coming right back, guys. You don't go anywhere with Reed Summers as we talk about alien intent. Why are they here? What are they doing? What's the purpose? What's next? We're going to get into that. You guys don't go anywhere. Stay tuned right here on Spaced Out Radio. All right. We are clear. Reed. Yeah. So how you been, man? Like I said, I saw you. I'm like, Reed is talking my language, man. Reed is really on. He's got his finger on the pulse as far as how to think through this. Because I always tell people, I'm like, common sense. I think the common sense we've been given is enough to figure this thing out. I think that's the tool, not any academic accolades or any of that. It's your human given common sense.
Absolutely. I mean, honestly, that's what I do is I think through this and I talk to other people as they think through this. And I think I totally agree. We are endowed with a broader set of capabilities. We are the human intelligence, let's not forget, the HI in this NHI-HI interface. And so lest we fork over all of that natural authority in the entity encounter over to government and academia and elsewhere, it's like, hold on a second. We are the human species, each individual. There's the species is somewhat conceptual, right? We all vary slightly genetically, obviously in our physiology and else in other ways. And so but who's human but us? And so if this is an encounter between us and them, I think we need to place it in our own hands to perceive it and to engage with it with our full suite of capabilities, one of which is we do have this thing called common sense. We also have this thing called instinct, right? All animals have instinct related to their environment and the entities in their environment. If NHI has been here for 100 years, I wouldn't doubt that many people have an instinctual and intuitive sense that they are here and a sense for what they are and for what this means. And so this is our deeper sensing, but I think there's more superficial sensing like logic, reason, caution, what we can observe with our five senses. Also very important. That's the human sensor.
Yes. And it's so obvious with like the different projects that the government has was it like Project Stargate and other things like that, where you can obviously see that the government understands that our senses have been suppressed, that they're suppressing them, and that we have way more that we can actually do with these senses. It isn't just
Right.
the 5 senses that we know of. There's probably 10 senses, maybe more than that we have. And if we realized that we had, a lot of people wouldn't have to think so much or doubt some of the things we're being presented with. It make more sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. The whole psi seemingly obsession of government, former government people, is indicative that deeper elements of the human psyche and their ability to interface with these entities telepathically, possibly, is a built-in capability. And guess who has it? All of us, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, in my mind, this is a meeting of minds. This is an entity encounter, and whenever you encounter another entity, take another human. That's a sentient life form that we've researched thoroughly and understand to a pretty high degree. How do you discern the intent of that entity for the purpose of your own response? Because again, the project, in my view, is we have to discern the entity of the visitors for the purpose of mounting a timely and necessary human response to their visitation in a collective fashion. So in my mind, I mean, we all can find our niche interest in this phenomenon or deep dive as deep as we think we want to go. But back up on the surface of mainstream life exists the bulk of humanity, right? And so ultimately, some majority, globally, hopefully, is going to have to mount some response to this global visitation. And so, yeah. So how do you discern the intent of another entity? Well, oftentimes you talk with them, you engage with them, you look at them. Well, the entities in question here are secretive. They're operating in covert fashion. They are operating in a long-standing state of non-disclosure. And so this is going to take something more like a decoding effort. How do you decode this intent? Because the entities are not going to prefer their intent to us, it doesn't seem. And even if they did at this stage, I mean, after 80 or 100 years of covert operation, they come in at the last moment and say, oh, we're here. Craft over every city. Here's what we're here to do. Here's some technology to heal the climate crisis. I would be very leery of that as well, with some understanding of the breadth of this presence in the world. So anyway, this is kind of the project as I view it. And there's ways that we and everyone, the common person, can begin to think through this and come to a probabilistic statement about the intent of the visitor.
And that's what we're doing tonight. The theme here is conversations that move the needle, because I think so many we waste so much time on parts of this that we really don't need to be discussing. We need to be discussing things like this and things that actually answer questions, right? So we got about 10 seconds here before we come back from radio.
Nice.
Radio. Okay. All right, everybody, welcome back to Spaced Out Radio, the After Hours radio show. We're on the back half of hour one as we are joined back with our guest, Reed Summers, and we're talking alien intent. We're about to get deep now. It's about to go deep. So you guys kick back, get ready for the conversation. And also, to all you space travelers out there, we're on a rock traveling through space as we speak. Think about taking the next step and joining the club. You can join our Spaced Out Radio Space Travelers Club for as little as $5 a month by joining our Patreon as we go ahead and get back in the conversation with Reed Summers. So let's start taking the turn, Reed. So okay, we're looking back. We're looking back on the initial, what we think is the initial current contact, which we're considering Roswell, and maybe even right before that, Gress talks about the Italy ET or craft that was captured. So, okay, what do you think happened in that scenario? Do you think there was an actual interface with human beings and ET? Do you think there were any messages delivered at that time, ultimatums maybe given back in the beginning, or what is your view on that?
Yeah, I mean, it might be good to kind of end up there. The communication history is probably the most speculative part of what we can discern. You know, who said what to who and when. But yeah, no, I mean, I think it's likely that messages were attempted to be sent. You know, it's tricky. We're a world of 192 countries, right? And we're a multipolar world in terms of superpowers competing adversarially. So who do you speak to? In what order, right? And if you have something to offer, who gets it first? Who markets it? Who gets it? You know, who patents it? Who gets it to which university? Who writes the study on it? We're a world, you know, ripe for division internally over extraterrestrial promises of salvation or trinkets from space, whatever might come our way. So, you know, it's a tricky world to engage. If I was a non-human entity, I would look down at this place and think twice about engaging. Maybe I'd send some encouragement for them to get their act together to resolve some of their crises and conflicts. But how do you engage this world for human benefit? It's a lot trickier once we start to think through that. And, you know, I think basically, you know, looking at the surface level of the phenomenon beyond the physical hard nature, craft in the sky and the ocean, and then going deeper, noting that comments have been made about biologics. Well, biological means what? It means this entity might have arisen in a naturalistic universe, in a Darwinian type scenario, right? Where they emerged in some planetary system, possibly in space. Maybe they were bred or created, and yet they are still in this bid for survival, replication, and that requires some environment and some resource. And the universe is a scarce place for such things, unless maybe you've achieved such heights that you can harvest, you know, energy from black matter or something. But if these are biological entities piloting physical craft with real demonstrated capabilities far exceeding our own, we have to start to kind of frame how we think about it in that way. I think we should think of it as entities that are arising in a naturalistic setting, with some sort of need for environment and resource. I think that is a logical way to start to think about it. And in all my work, you know, we talk about process. I think process is important because we're inside of a process, whether we know it or not. We're ingesting information. It's like Tetris, right? These little blocks are trying to sort into our brain cavity and into whatever inherent logic we have. And so it's good to just take note of the process we're in. And I think there's a natural process of going from impossibility to possibility, which is your mind expands to allow for numerous possibilities that the universe may throw our way. And then you start to look at the phenomenon and you encounter aspects of it that really are beyond contest. at this point. Like I've mentioned, that physicality. Is it possible there's non-corporeal or extra-dimensional or extra-temporal aspects to it? Of course that's possible. But what we know is that they're physical craft, piloted intelligently. And what we're starting to know is that there's a biological element and a human interface that's long-standing. So that right there just takes you from possibilities to probabilities.
Yeah.
And then, my thing is, I think those who focus on this, it is important to arrive at a place where you can make a starting assessment, which is not a conclusion. It's basically to say, based on what I can know and what I have in hand, I would assess it this way. And with that assessment, I would go focus my inquiry further. I would possibly go look at better evidence that would either substantiate or negate my assessment. And I would either prove it right or disprove it and reformulate it. But this inability to assess, it's almost like ufology is allergic to anything that sounds like a conclusive statement. We just got to back our way into possibilities again, back up into possibilities. We just got to expand. We got to expand. I think this is part of the obfuscation. Someone does not want people to come to any solid determination, because once they do that, then they can act. That marshals their energies and allows them to work with other human beings toward resolving what the assessment might indicate. So.
Yeah, I like that. So I like looking at the probability part. Okay, these things we know are on physical craft, and they have been listed to have been biological entities. So we do definitely know those things. And so I guess that goes into a lot of people that look at this and they say we shouldn't put our humanly intentions on and kind of put those on ETs as if they would experience right or wrong or war and peace.
Right.
But I think it's like pretty logical to kind of go down that path, and I guess that would lean into, when for those of us who haven't had a direct interface with the extraterrestrial, we depend on our stories from our experiencers who state that they have, and so a lot of those cases, I want to say probably 90%, those people have talked about having great experiences. The ETs have told them that they're here to fix this, and they want to see us ascend. But then you have Lou Elizondo or someone from within the government, David Grush even, who have talked about Lou saying somber and using that word, which that always has stuck with me. And I still want to know. I want to talk to Lou and ask him, like, really, what did he mean by that? And then you have David Grush, who has admitted that there have been instances where people have died at the hands of ETs, whether accidentally or on purpose. So when you look at that, how do you go down the thought process of trying to figure out what you should be believing in, or should you just be aware of both things being possible?
Right. Great questions. So I want to kind of start off by calling out some of these imposed barriers to critical thinking that I run into all the time. And these are like automatic refrains. We start to talk about intent, needing to understand what they want so we can respond to it. I hear this all the time. Because they are not attacking us, they must be here to help us. Because if they wanted the world, they would have taken it already. If they wanted to destroy us, they could, which is kind of a haunting thing, because it's like, wow, so we're admitting that this could be a threat, profound existential threat, but they're just not choosing to, right? But as a result of those A, B, yes, no, kind of, they're kind of like false dichotomies, right? Well, if not this, then it must be that. If they're not here to hurt, they must be here to help. There's a wide spectrum of possibilities in between, and we are in no way at a point where we can resolve the potential of a threat and sign on collectively with a possible beneficial visitation. I mean, there's not a lot in the collectively observable record, if not nothing, that suggests beneficial intent. And Lou came out and said that in his book. It's not to say it suggests detrimental intent or hostile intent, but it does not suggest beneficial intent. When you look at what these craft have done around nuclear sites, for example, when you look at the abduction phenomenon, which is 90% positive, would most certainly not be an accurate representation of the distribution of experience among abductees. And also, of course, those who have positive experiences are more likely to report them than those who feel profoundly violated and damaged by the interaction. So unfortunately, solid research that is credible has not been done. And so we can't lean on this while most experiencers say it's good. So, I mean, I know a lot of experiencers do say that. But there are these kind of cognitive barriers, which these refrains. And so, I would respond to some of these, like, if they're not attacking us, they must be here to help us. As if humanistic violence is the one variable by which we can reverse decode intent. They're good because they're not attacking us. Well, maybe they are aggressive, they're just hyper intelligent, and they're doing it on a time scale or in a way, for example, psychically or genetically, that we would not know how to do. Okay, so like, just because there's not bombs and bullets flying around does not mean this is good, right? That's obvious. But many, many people have resolved that question with that one assumption. And so I think that assumption is dead on delivery, frankly. And we need to move beyond that kind of thing. If they wanted the world, they would have taken it already. Maybe they do want the world, and maybe they're taking it over 500 years.
Yeah.
Maybe we are part of the world that they want, the natively adapted apex species who has built a world civilization capable of extracting biological resources, mineral resources, on a scale never before since starting in the 20th century, which, by the way, when did they show up? The 20th century. I think a lot of indication as to why they're here can be discovered. Again, these are probability statements. These are not statements of absolute certainty. And my whole thing is we need to get down the road of assessment to conclusion with iteration, which is to say, you take new evidence in. And once you assess, you take new evidence in. You assess, you take new evidence in, and you iterate forward to more conclusive statements of certainty. I don't think we are at a point of being able collectively to assert something conclusively, but I think we are at a point where we can state something probabilistically. And so, yeah, when you look at, when NHI came, how they came, it's a 20th century event, very distinct. Well, what else happened in the 20th century, right? Unprecedented century in the history of the planet and the people, the human species. And I frankly think it's highly likely and logical that they're here for one of two things, or both. They're here for the planet, or they're here for us. What else is here? And this planet, we can already make statements about the rarity of terrestrial Earth-like worlds, such as our own. They're more rare than common. And what happened in the 20th century? Well, we started to destroy it and threaten its habitability with nuclear weapons, right? So, and who shows up? So I think this begins to kind of narrow how we might be thinking at this moment, at least, about what we can see.
Yeah, and I like the whole time aspect there, right? Because time may not their time frame may not equate to what we consider is time as well, right? So 100 years for us could be a day for them, and maybe this is happening over a 15-day period for them, which would be 1,500 years from us. So we would never see the actual intent of what they're doing. But then also, like you stated as well, like they're here, maybe we're part of what they want as well. And I guess you could kind of almost look at that, right, as like a swarm of killer bees who are deadly, but we keep them around because they're able to produce honey, right? And they're able to do this natural thing that we can't do on our own. So we keep them around. And maybe that kind of goes into the whole zoo thing that a lot of people talk about. Now, here's the other part of this. Like, when I bring up the experiencer, because you're going to have people out there, I'm sure, maybe even in the chat, that are like, hey, no, I know why they're here. They've told me directly that this is the reason why they're here and this is what their intent is. But then I always say to that, okay, even if we took that at face value, if we're like, okay, these things are literally telling you this, how do you know there's no deception in play there as far as what their intent is? Like, why wouldn't you think that? What makes you trust these things to a point to where you're going to take their words at face value? And so those are some of the things that I think about when I'm thinking about why they are here. And we also see them, sitting up and potentially setting up bases underwater. What do you think that's about? Because I'll tell you real quick, I had a sighting where in the middle of the day, I guess these things are called flotillas when they're in a huge group. I had 47 objects in the middle of the day that flew right overhead, and they were in like a formation like you would see militarily, right? They didn't do anything bad that I know of, at least, right? And but when you look at things like that, and then you start to think about intent, it's like, well, why would they be in a formation? Why would they be grouped together in that way?
Right.
Have you looked at any of that? And then what is your outlook on situations like that?
Hmm. Well, regarding alien bases, I think we need to go beyond considering this as a visitation and start thinking of it as an intervention. Now, there can be many types of intervention. Good, good according to their intent, good according to what they think would be our intent, and detrimental. But they are involved in the world. This is not a remote observation or simply a detection scenario, I don't think, at this point. When you look at the number of craft, the number of sightings, estimates of possibly 50,000 good sightings a year globally, that is a pervasive phenomenon. Numerically significant. Just think of the infrastructure that might be positioned in our solar system or on the dark side of our moon, which unfortunately we are in geostationary lock with, right? So what a perfect beachhead or grounds for operation. And of course, we as human beings, we're divided, we're distracted, we're embroiled in our conflicts, we could care less. But going back to your former question about evidence, it's like evidence comes out, statements are made, and the world glances up from their morning cereal and more or less, looks back down to the newspaper. So, we're very vulnerable as a species, and we are sitting on top of a world which might be of value. Rarity might confer value in the universe. And I would wager that value brings visitation and that destruction of value brings intervention. And we are altering fundamentally the habitability of this planet. And we are destroying its biodiversity at a record rate. We're causing a sixth mass extinction. So I think it's appropriate to see this as an involvement, an incursion into the world. Now, for what purpose? That's the question, right? So, I kind of have multiple ways of looking at it. One is the behavioral observation. That's in an intel world, what they might do is like, well, let's start with what we can observe in their behavior. What do they say? What do they do? Who do they interact with? There are signs there. It's not scatter. It's a scatter plot, but we could draw a line through that seemingly random series of dots and begin to think of it in a specific way. For example, the non-human intelligence has seemed willing to interact with and transact with multiple foreign adversaries. I do not, to my knowledge, know of an attempt to reach global governing bodies like the United Nations, the World Health Organization, right? The World Trade Organization. So to me, they know. We have to assume that they know everything about us. They could have been observing us for 1,000 years or longer or shorter. We have been transmitting our species data set into space ever since the invention of radio transmission technologies. They have our data. They've run it through their own equivalent technology to AI. They know. They know us better than we know ourselves, probably. We should responsibly assume that.
Right.
And so they know what makes us tick. They know what our evidential requirements are and what leads to conviction, what leads to confusion. And I think that could easily be played against us. We're extraordinarily vulnerable. And so that there are craft in this number, and that there are underwater movements, facilities, there are craft going 400 or 500 knots that are the size of a football field, that are multiple sizes larger than a nuclear submarine. Why would you need a craft that large?
Right.
It's to operate a program. This is a programmatic involvement in the world. This is not a scouting mission. They're not taking photos and leaving. Okay, it's something more, it could be more akin to a habitation, not a visitation. And so the size of the craft, the number of them, their fixation with water, which yes, could be for multiple reasons, but one, it's a great place to hide. Because it happens to be that on planet Earth, we have great detection abilities, except in one place, under the ocean. We know almost as much about the ocean as we know about our own moon. So, again, species vulnerability. And I sometimes wonder if this is like a built-in evolutionary handicap that, an emerging world of divided tribes, nations, what have you, starts to gain the technological ability to master their environment, to change their world fundamentally, and to project themselves beyond their world. And it is at that time that others see, detect, observe, study, analyze, and then intervene in order to change or alter the course of that species development. And yet, here's the hard thing: we are in their paradigm. Probably, they saw us. They mounted a visitation. They intended to come. They're not in our paradigm. And so 80 years goes by. We collect all this evidence, this data about UFOs, and we are still in no greater position to do anything about it than we were in 1947. And that's a problem. Like, there is urgency and consequence built into species interaction, especially if there are evolutionary forces at play.
Do you think that, as we got about 4 minutes till we go to our top of the hour break, do you think that at any point in time, not just our government, but any power that be around the world have actually maybe observed the capabilities of these things on a malevolent level, like maybe shooting down a plane or just some sort of conflictual sort of thing that might just show, okay, we have this force here, we have these muscles here?
I have come across information that I find credible that would suggest yes, that there is a quiet hot war going on between multiple governments and multiple hostile NHI. And, if true, that's alarming. And that, we might think twice before we incriminate our own government, if they are in some sort of bid to gain technological parity with these forces, to overturn whatever agreements or dynamics in the engagement have allowed these craft and their entities to operate freely in the human space, to potentially cause serious threats to public harm, and to resist those specific forces. I mean, that's if that scenario is true, that changes how you might think about all this. And for me, I'm not in. The urgency and the consequence factor are significant in my view. And 80 years have gone by. We have to get somewhere. We have to get down the road with this. I don't think we can understand or comprehend fully the visitation taking place, the number, the morphology, the taxonomy that we might draft, to reflect it. It could be way more complex than we think. It could also be simpler than we think. But these are fundamentally non-human entities, right? So to get inside their head, to understand their world, which is the network of interactions that they have with forces who are not here, which most certainly exists. They most certainly have their own exosystem. We have an ecosystem. They have an exosystem. We don't understand the exosystem. And I don't think we will on a necessary timeline for our response. And so for me, it's not about ruling everything in. The interdimensional potential, the cryptoterrestrial potential, right? The biblical or scriptural potential, right? I don't think we can rule all of that in now, but what we do need to rule in is whether there is a physical alien visitor. Those three words. Are they physical? Are they alien, meaning not us? And are they a visitor, which means they're not from here? Because if that's true, that is significant. That we should be thinking in the context of evolution and species interaction.
Okay.
Because it's, yeah.
As we got about a minute to go to break, just real quick, because I wanted to heavily talk about this hot war on the other side of the break. But I asked a guest, and I've asked many guests, what do you think is going on here? If you had to choose one of these words, would you say alien invasion, alien visitation, or alien occupation? Which one of those would you go with?
I would not go with any of those three myself. I would go with something closer to an intervention or an integration or a colonization. Occupation doesn't really suggest intent. Occupation could be for many different reasons. It could be, it could be out of the best good-hearted will in the universe. But I think we need to...
Let's stop right there. And we're going to come back on the other side of the break with Reed Summers here, getting deep into the alien intent. You guys don't go anywhere. Stay right there.
Conversations that move the needle.
Conversations that move the needle.
You're listening to After Hours with Mr. Rob G on the only place where you can own the night. Spaced Out Radio.
Spaced Out Radio.
You've tuned your dial to the right frequency.
All right, we're clear and we're off camera now for 5 minutes. Read. I'll play a video.
Okay.
You'll see you in a minute. Yes, everyone. Welcome back to Spaced Out Radio after hour number 2. So we're back with our guest, Reed Summers, talking to Alien Intent. We got about 30 seconds before we come back to radio. You guys, I got some of your questions already. Definitely keep them coming, and we'll pose those in the last half of hour 2 as we get ready to go. Yeah, I like the intervention thing, Reed. I'm wrapping my mind around that concept. I think it's pretty cool way to look at it.
Uh-huh.
All right, here we go. All right, everybody, welcome back to Spaced Out Radio after hour number 2. As we go ahead and jump back into the conversation of alien intent. Why are they here? We're kind of spitballing, talking our way through this thing, looking at the most logical reasons why they're here. Guys, don't forget, you can follow us at any time over there on X and Instagram at Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Radio Show. We'd appreciate a follow if you wouldn't mind, as we go ahead and get back into the show and get back with Reed Summers here. So, Reed, you were talking before the break about, you have reason to believe that there's some sort of hot war is what you called it, like a covert war against maybe some of the powers that be in this world and extraterrestrials. Are you able to go into detail maybe on some of the things that may have happened, or what can you let us know?
Not really. No, I don't have great insight into the specific, locales, what was taken down by who, to what end. But I think it makes sense that if NHI have been not in visitation but in intervention or in a programmatic incursion into our world, with working with or interfacing with multiple foreign powers, that has affected events on the ground, maybe more than we think. It's a kind of a profound question to ask, which is, if the events of the 20th century had not happened, World War II, detonation of nuclear weapons, environmental destruction, the technological strides we've made, would they be here? If we were still living in something like the late stage 19th century, would they be here? Not so sure. And inversely, if they had not shown up at all, would we have a different world today? Would the secrecy apparatus be what it is? Would the state of global tensions be what they are? Which, of course, is somewhat surrounding the secrecy apparatus, right? I mean, alien technology and science would be such a unbelievable powerhouse, financially, politically, geopolitically. It's enough to like distort human affairs in profound ways. And so that we now have some confirmation such technologies have been at least recovered and reverse engineered, I think we could make a probability statement there that has affected the state of geopolitical affairs in the world. Now, is NHI completely neutral and oblivious to this? Was it a total mistake on their part? I don't know about that. I don't think that's highly plausible. I think, again, they know us. They know what makes us tick, and they know what they're doing, flying over our cities at low speed, right? Several hundred feet above multiple onlookers with multiple cameras watching. They know what they're doing. And I think some of these sightings are shows of presence. I think they're shows of capability, and in some cases, a show of force. And so it's an involvement, and it's affected things. Now, this is part of the problem with making the assumption that they're here to help. They're here to support humanity in our hour of need. They're here to give us things that we could not gain ourselves. All very reasonable desires. We all want to benefit in life and be supported and loved by. We want to see the universe as a loving place, not a malevolent place. And I get that. I don't think we need to see it the opposite of that at all. I just think we need to see it pragmatically and as a naturalistic environment. And so if an entity, we can do a thought experiment together. If an entity came and they saw the state of affairs on Earth, they wanted to help, literally the world, how would they do that? Right? So post-World War II, America's the victor. Who do they engage with? Well, probably the United States, right? How does the USSR feel about that? Do they do that equally? Do they engage both simultaneously in the same fashion, making the exact same offers? Tricky, right? Because look what humans would do with whatever was given. And so when you run this thought experiment of how a beneficial form of life would benefit humanity and human interests, it's a little bit trickier than most people think, right? And, I think that's one thought experiment. The other is, what if an entity were in our space, not with malevolence, because again, I really don't think the benevolent, malevolent, or the evil word is necessary at all. I think let's talk self-interest, self-interested NHI. Let's talk disinterested NHI. Just like you walk past an anthill on a hike, in 1 second, you could crush their world and eliminate most of their kind. Are you malevolent? Are you evil? More disinterested. Maybe you're a little devious, right? But you're not fundamentally corrupt. I don't think we need to make assessments of their fundamental quality of being. I think we need to make assessments of the impact their presence is having on human interests. So where beneficial, detrimental, instead of benevolent, malevolent, I think is much more useful. And I think we can begin to, and I hope in the coming several years, as disclosure rolls and more whistleblowers come forth with further indications of the degree of penetration NHI have had into our government and even outside of our governments and internationally, I think we will be able to understand a little bit better whether this has been had a beneficial effect or a detrimental effect on the state of affairs on Earth.
Okay, and what do you think is the reason that the governments won't be forthcoming with evidence? A lot of people think it's because they don't want to scare the planet, the citizens. Some people say it's because they just want to harness the technology and try to keep that a secret from other nations. What do you think is the main reason that the government won't be straight up with the public?
A number of reasons. Some of them we might find reasonable or understandable, at least. Some of them I think we can identify as not reasonable, not just. But the first is, and I think this is very important to call out, I think that there is a bad actor in our world. There is one or more detrimental NHI present in our world. And so if such a force is present with technological ability that far surpasses any government's ability to match or to impede or even to monitor, how do you tell your public about that? The citizen government contract is one of, we pay our taxes and you provide us the basic services and maintain freedom and enshrine the rights to happiness and so forth. The Constitution. So if there's a force that is fundamentally disregarding the constitutional responsibilities of government and impeding its ability to carry them forward, how do you disclose that? Yeah. That's a problem. And furthermore, that bad actor, if they're willing to do things to you, they're probably willing to do things to others, to other allied nations, or do things with other adversarial nations in opposition to you. And I think it's a little bit more complex, in fact, way more complex than we think in terms of what's really going on under the skin between Russia, China, and the United States and their respective spheres of influence and allied players that kind of, that back them up. So do we have a bad actor in the world? If so, that's one reason for non-disclosure. Second, has there been collusion between government? Right? Is there culpability in what that bad actor has perpetrated against human populations? Has government participated? Have they benefited? Right? Wow, that's a reason for non-disclosure. Have they extracted things of side value and made a lot of money, and or tilted the balance of power in the world? Because the balance of power in the world is and has been post World War II one of a prevailing Western liberal democratic order that is at least presiding generally over the rules-based systems of planet Earth at this time. Was that propped up by an NHI? Was technology or power gained that enabled that? Whew, that's controversial. How's that going to make other adversaries in the world feel? So there are a lot of reasons for non-disclosure. I have my own theories as to what is really going on with disclosure, and they are theoretical. So I, of course, like everyone, we have to speculate, with an absence of evidence and such phenomenal obfuscation, one must do what one can do. But yes, I have some theories as to what is going on, which we can get into. But I think, again, we have to place at least some, if not a majority of the controversy on the non-human visitor. And we have to account for what they could be doing in the technological space, the scientific space, what they might be doing genetically with the human species. I mean, these are vectors of penetration into the human world, and it could be for many different reasons. And to some degree, we can decode intent generally, probabilistically, for the purpose of our human response. But to some degree, we have to admit that we cannot fully decode intent. And so we have to retreat to this line. Well, we don't know what they are fully. We don't know why they're here fully. We don't know their exosystem or their the larger network that propels their being here. So what do we do? Well, we need to do what we need to do anyway. We need to become a coherent species with the sufficient unity to voice our intent in the universe, to articulate our rules of engagement, and to delineate our domains of sovereignty. We, I think, need to be a sovereign species to a degree, and we need to exert that sovereignty and not simply abdicate it based on a whim and a hope that, well, they're more advanced than us, they're technological, they've eclipsed the need for war, they can travel the stars, they're better than us, and look at us. And I see people in this kind of like pit of an anti-human bent, and which is like, give over the world, give it to them. They're better than us. We're corrupt. We're an infectious species anyway. They probably own the world. It's probably their world in the beginning. They probably authored us, our religions, our scriptures. Man, we are just dumping the bags of coins at the feet of an entity whose face we have never seen, right? And why are we doing that? I don't understand why we're doing that. We're not thinking like human beings. We're not thinking like the native peoples on the turf that is our turf, interfacing intelligently with a visitor. And there are examples in at least the historical record of this sentient species, the human species, that we have studied thoroughly, to suggest what happens when the less advanced species, when the less advanced force makes first contact with the more advanced force. It rarely goes well for the less advanced. And that's not always because the more advanced has a malicious intent, right? There are threats to the less advanced that are inherent in the interaction. Even if the more advanced has a beneficial intent, it could still play out very poorly for the other party in the matter. So, this is, to my mind, grounded thinking, and it's cautious, it's responsible, it's aware that risk is non-zero, period. I would invite anyone to argue with me on that. Risk is 100% non-zero. I think risk is actually extraordinarily high, given the unknowns, the vulnerabilities, and the consequences of those unknowns acting upon those vulnerabilities. So with risk, non-zero at least, we have to be thinking this way. If we say, no, we don't need to be thinking this way, or what I often hear is, Reed, this is fearful. You're being fearful right now. You need to be loving. You need to, the way you think and what you want will invite in from the universe equal forces to that. It will, law of attraction, right? It's like, wow.
Yeah.
I've heard that's about as low on the totem pole as you can get in terms of a high risk native response to first contact.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, non-zero is a great way to put it. And it's probably roughly around 50-50, really, because if we don't understand either side, it's got to be even split there. But what would be some of the, how, with that mindset, because it blows my mind when I talk to certain people and they lean on the non-threat narrative, no threat narrative. And I'm like, okay, so, when you go on a trip, and you pack responsibly, even though it's going to be warm weather there, you bring a coat in case it's cold at night. It might not be, but it'd be weird to not have a coat and it's cold and you could have brought a coat, right? So with that whole theory there, what would be some of the ways that you would say humanity should be preparing themselves just to be ready for both sides of this conversation?
Sure. Great question. Well, that's a whole conversation. I'm not sure we have total time to get into it now. There's kind of the collective action, the individual personal action, and then maybe the preparatory action in preparation for both. I think it is important to account for risk. Here's a simple equation: risk equals threat times vulnerability times consequence. Well, vulnerability and consequence we can almost resolve. High. What's threat? Well, threat is also a simple equation. Threat equals capability times intent, right? And so capability is extraordinarily high. And so it all comes down to intent. And that is my selected word and selected focus for this very reason, is we have to make some starting assessment of what intent is more probably than less probably. It's a probability statement.
Yeah.
And once we make that, at least as I've made it, I come to an assessment that this is an intervention. It's programmatic, and there seems to be some attempt to alter our species' direction psychologically, genetically, and you could say politically or geopolitically, if you want to go international. And so with that assessment, what do? Well, first off, you go and collect the evidence that would substantiate that at the highest point of impact. What is the highest point of impact that NHI are having in our world? It's the abduction phenomenon. It's the potential of a public safety hazard in people being removed from their homes, experimented upon, having forced impregnation or other violations to their personal sovereignty take place, with potential genetic outcomes, including and not limited to the creation of a parallel entity, a human hybrid individual. If that is taking place, that then predisposes the action pathway very specifically. I think what is needed now in ufology is to uncover that. Now, I know that's coming out more now. There's more talk of implants. There's more talk of abductions. There's more talk of people being harmed by UAP, which of course could be a side effect of the technology or being too proximal to it, but also people being harmed or killed by non-human intelligence. So we need to go right to that point of the highest penetration with the highest impact to public safety and either rule it in or rule it out. And that right there is going to set up the international conversation on what to do. And, I'll leave it there. We could definitely dive deeper into courses of action, but I don't know if you want to stay kind of more backed out and be looking at more of the scenarios of the NHI intent.
Yeah. Because obviously there's so many places that could go, and we can definitely readdress that at some point down the line. But let me ask you this: does Reed, with the information that Reed has, when Reed goes out into the world, are you more cautious just at decisions and knowing that these things are out there and knowing that we are still trying to figure out the intent?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think twice about certain things or doing certain things because of the risk of exposing yourself to something or situation? Because the reason why I ask that is because I think that I think people should know that things are here and just be aware that, you could run into something truthfully at any time. A lot of people are seeing things right over their homes. Like if you choose to take this back road, like I drive through the desert, for instance, I'll go from Las Vegas to Reno, then it's hundreds of miles of desert. You're the only one on the road, right? So do you make a decision to do that with knowing the things that you know or having the outlook that you have?
Yeah. I mean, I think when you come to understand that there is a detrimental set of NHI in the world, that there is an oppositional stance being taken toward them by certain governments, that there is some degree of a hot war, and certainly a cold war, and that the NHI are focused on individuals with psychic abilities, that they are likely engaged in abduction of people. That definitely changes how you see the world. I don't walk around in a fearful state about it. Unfortunately, the more I talk about this, the more hostile forms of resistance get levied at me, which is concerning. Like, why? Why is this so threatening? This conversation we're having, to me, this should be happening on a CNN town hall. This should be happening on Russian RT. this should be happening on, in state-run TV in China. I don't know. This is not a threatening conversation, right? To talk about the possibility of threat, because threat is real in life. Threat is not just what they intend to do that is malicious. Threats can ensue accidentally from the interaction. Threats can be from within, not from without. To not talk about threat is to be willfully negligent and willfully selective in how one engages with the phenomenon. And that doesn't make sense to me unless one is being influenced or is part of some sort of narrative manipulation campaign, some propaganda effort to tell the world that there's something hyper positive and we all need to sign on with it now. Some galactic federation now. I have a simple rubric I'll share real quick regarding, extraterrestrial communications. And 4 parts, a bunch of red flags, a bunch of green flags, but basically, is it verifiable? Can this communication and its claims be verified by observed phenomenon? Because the moment we throw out observed phenomenon to sign on with an extraterrestrial communication, we are sacrificing one of our core capabilities, the 5 senses, the human sensor. So it's not that we need to be able to observe everything they say, but if what they say runs counter to what we can observe, and we're being asked, invited, or even gaslighted into demeaning our own capabilities and signing on with a hyper-intelligent set of capabilities, that's a flag to me. So verification, plausibility, is their message plausible? If not, at the minimum, they didn't do the effort to think about their communication in ways that would win human hearts and minds. Ouch, oops. On the worst side of the spectrum, they're asking us to abandon really the traditions of our indigenous science, culture, and religion to sign on with something non-human. So plausibility is important. If you're going to get any collective humanity to act or respond, it should be plausible. And there's a lot of alien messages that are not plausible. And then last 2, power and action. Who gets the power in this dynamic? Are we basically signing on with a federation and we're junior partner, right? Are we giving access to our world? I mean, where does the power go? And then last, what's the call to action? What are they asking for? A lot of these alien communications, they have a pretty profound ask. Some of them even go so far as to say, which, man, this is red flag on all 4 of these, that you made a soul contract to be taken, to be abducted as part of a human upgrade project. But you are not at a vibrational level of consciousness sufficient to recall that contract and to embrace it, which is why you're afraid. Your fear is a sign of your lower intelligence. You need to open up to higher intelligence. Wow. If you hear that, raise the red flag as high as you can raise it, up the totem pole, because that is gaslighting, that is implausible, is not backed by the verified phenomenon, and the power dynamic, my goodness. You are basically entering a master subservient relationship with those entities. And I hear this. And why am I hearing this? Why is this being promoted to tens or hundreds of thousands of people right now? I would have to say that there is an effort to manipulate human perception of the visitor, to acclimate us to it, to make it cool, novel, and even conscious or a higher consciousness to entertain their role in our lives today. I think there is an effort to write them into our origin stories and our scriptures. There's also a natural human need to understand our origins and our scriptures, which I get, which is, wow, we're being visited by beings from the universe. This is huge. We need to rethink our history and everything. And I get that. I totally think we do. But the problem is that there's an actor in our space that might want to use those openings for their purposes. What better opportunity to say, we're from here, we authored you, we are the gods, we are the angels, we are the ones who wrote your scriptures, and we've come back. And here we're opening up those channels wide-eyed with no critical thinking. I mean, that's you want to talk vulnerability, that's off the charts.
Yes, and I'd love to continue that conversation with you, Reed, right after the break. We have Reed Summers here dropping jewels. different way of thinking, different way. Maybe you should adopt some of this logical thinking when it comes to phenomena. We're going to be getting into some of your questions and a lot more on the back half of this hour 2 right here, Spaced Out Radio. You guys don't go anywhere. All right, clear. All right, man, we're already here, already at the end of the conversation, man. Oh man, and it's just like you said, it's just so many ways we can go. So I would love to have this conversation more. I think you should be heard more with this perspective. Because I'm a nuts I'm a logic based person as well. And like I said earlier, I think common sense solves a lot or answers a lot of these questions, at least with the thought experiments, like you mentioned here. And it's just good to have these sort of conversations when trying to figure this thing out. You're right. This should be the type of conversations they're having in Congress and all over the place, anywhere that they're approaching this. And, I think I like the equations, that equation aspect as well. I mean, that just makes a lot of sense. So you're dropping some gems here for us, man. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Tried and true. I mean, these are the known knowns. These are our assets. This is the knowledge we've built up as a species. We should use it.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess I'll ask you this when we get off break, but we'll talk about the controlled disclosure versus catastrophic disclosure, because I would love to see what you think about that.
Yeah.
Let me say hi to a few people. Richard Minnick, thanks for coming in. Ross Lambda, thanks for coming in. I see you out there. Angels Are Life. Nikki, I see you as well. Damian Wyatt, Kevin Kennedy, TMI. Let's see who else has come in. Super Crazy Movie Geek. Dogface is here. Kenzo. Hey, Kenzo. Kurt W75. Glad to see you showed up tonight. Jerry Carter, thanks for coming in. Paul Naman, yes, I can't believe you're here. Thanks for coming, sir. Eve, hey Eve, thanks for coming. Hayo Young, thanks for coming on in. Cat Tongue 96, thanks for coming on in. LVL Dr. Love, thanks for coming on in tonight. Big Bird, thanks for coming in. Zoo. I'm just gonna assume that's how you say it. I'm probably wrong, but thanks for coming on in tonight. Appreciate you showing up. Renee La Riviere, thanks for showing up tonight at the After Hours radio show. We appreciate you. Let's see who else is showing up here. Susan Place, thanks for coming on in. Leslie Light Kesta, thanks for coming in. Appreciate you showing up. Abbott Hoffman, I see you, Abbott. Thanks for coming on in. Rosa Muratori, thanks for coming in. Appreciate you showing up. And for anybody who might be here new for the first time tonight, we do this thing here 7 days a week, just so you know. This is the After Hours radio show. We run this Saturdays and Sundays, 8 p.m. Pacific until 11 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday. Then you got Dave Scott running the Woo Train Monday through Friday, 9 p.m. until midnight. And we have Lee and Jax doing the show Fridays from 8 p.m. Pacific till 9 p.m. So, point being is there's 7 days a week. You can come here to Space Out Radio and find some really awesome content. I see you guys are definitely putting questions in there, and I appreciate you. But yeah, consider hitting that subscribe button if you're here for the first time. We'd appreciate seeing you back. So, let me see. Make sure I didn't miss anyone here. Okay, there's another question. Gotcha. All right, we're looking good. Dewey Cheatham and how? Okay, you just came in. I seen you show up. Thanks for coming on in. Rain C, I see you as well. Yeah, thanks for coming in. Rain C. Yeah, we are looking good. Let me check the questions here. And also, Wes Decker, appreciate your awesome support of Spaced Out Radio. Didn't get to tell you earlier. Another engaging conversation and fantastic guest. Great job, Mr. Rob G. Yeah, we only want the people to move the needle, and definitely Reed is one that does that. So we're just glad to have him here, guys. Show your love. Let's see. Yeah, I see your questions here, Super Crazy Movie Geek. Let's see. Ooh. Okay. All right. We're looking good, guys. We got about 30 seconds here before we come back. Okay, I'll ask that as well. You got a lot of questions, Super Crazy Movie Geek. Good. Let's see. Kurt W75 just says, thank you for your time, Reed. Good talk, brother.
Thank you.
All right. 10 seconds, guys. Let's get ready to go. All right, everybody. Welcome back to Spaced Out Radio. We're on the backside of hour number 2 with our guest, Reed Summers here, getting into some stuff that people consider controversial. Just talking this thing through, right? Let's look at all logical options. Loving the equations. We had a great talk. If you missed any of this interview, make sure you jump into our archives. They're absolutely free. YouTube.com/@SpacedOutRadio. We have a plethora of shows and information you can get into as we go ahead and jump right back into the conversation here with Reed. Reed, I did want to ask you, there's terms floating around, catastrophic disclosure versus controlled disclosure. I'll just tell you my understanding or how I look at that, right? I think controlled disclosure is the government's attempt to slow drip the information, maybe drag it out for another 25, 50, 80 years. And I think the reasoning for that, now obviously could be wrong, but it seems like they just want to make sure that they figure out how to maintain power structure on the opposite side of their disclosure. Then you have catastrophic disclosure, which is ETs can show up tomorrow and this thing is out the bag and everybody knows what's going on. Which one of the two do you go with? Controlled or catastrophic disclosure?
Well, first and foremost, I advocate accurate disclosure because I think the risk of a false disclosure is very real, either by human actors, whether this government or another foreign government, or by the NHI themselves. When you look into the abduction phenomenon, it appears abductees have been specifically groomed to perform functions during some sort of grand event, some unveiling of NHI presence. And that's concerning to me. I don't think we're equipped to discern the authenticity, the veracity of that kind of disclosure, and the potential for it to be incorrect, misleading, partially correct, partially incorrect is just phenomenal. And we have not even taken the time to assess the possible scenarios of intent that could be behind such a disclosure. So I worry about a future NHI appearance that basically utilizes an extensive network of apologists and supporters and believers to promote wide open acceptance of these entities and the acceptance of whatever technology they may grant, which may be impressive, but it might be a Trojan horse.
Yeah.
There are few logical pathways that you can imagine where we could imbibe or ingest a non-human technology into our current global system without it causing conflict, academic, scientific, political, etc. So I'm concerned about that. I support disclosure, absolutely. I think the people need to be on the side of whatever the whole human response is to this visitation. I think the population at large holds the fuller record of the NHI's interface with the human species. I don't think government can do this all on its own, whether that's to fight it or interface with it. I think the people are needed. And so I'm a huge advocate for disclosure. it is my understanding that the NHI are not advocates for disclosure. They do not want disclosure. Now, why would they not want disclosure? And would that not cause us to be a bit cautious in making assumptions? Right. So, I think it'll be very important to see in the next 2 to 3 years who wants disclosure and who doesn't, because the world needs it. The bad actor in the world definitely does not want it. Who's working with the bad actor? Where have they embedded themselves? With what world powers? Could be with multiple world powers. There could also be multiple bad actors. So I think disclosure is something to support. Obviously, it can't all be everything yesterday. Damn it, right? We have to be a little bit more mature. We can't be childish and just say we want it all now. It's like, this is not small ball disclosure. This is big ball disclosure. This is powerful enough to start a world war. Yeah. And I would not be surprised if a major regional conflict goes hand in hand with this event. So I think it's that scale of an event. And so caution and intelligent rollout are due. I don't think necessarily the human actors who would disclose will necessarily disclose it accurately either. And again, national security interests will be woven in, right? It's not going to be as clean as clean as can be. It's going to be complex and messy, unfortunately. But yeah, I am in support of it. I understand there are reasons to not disclose. I don't think those are reasons to not disclose. Those are not my reasons. I think there are reasons for a more careful rollout, a progressive rollout, and also to prepare people really for an accurate understanding. Because again, we have to ask, what is it that's going to be disclosed? I rarely hear people talking about this. We want the truth. What truth? Whose truth? What level of truth? And the government is not going to pony up everything they've done, everything they've gained, right? That's not what governments do. That's not what humans do. So we can't expect angelic behavior on behalf of our fellow humankind. If part of the disclosure is that we are facing, among other phenomena, a physical alien who is not indigenous to this world, that's enormous. And the mechanisms have to be in place for global society to process that event for beneficial outcomes. I mean, that's what I'm all for. I want human survival and advancement. I want a unified human response, a whole species response to contact. And I want detrimental activity in the human space to end. So those are big goals, lofty, maybe unaccomplishable, but something to reach for.
And I like that. What you stated about just, are you ready to hear why they're here? Like, are you ready to hear that? And that's, I think, one of the biggest things is just expect to maybe hear what you never thought that it could be. Think it could be the whole opposite side of what you've been thinking this whole time. And then I like the experiencers or abductees maybe being used as or fed false information or just being used as misinformation agents to kind of spread that story to the public. Just looking at that and thinking about that, like, that would be super effective in creating a false narrative across humanity. That would be wow.
Yeah, I mean, and many people could be used who are not abductees, or not even contactees. These manipulative tactics work on many levels. I'll just note, often people say, "Oh, you're just focused on the bad side. You don't know about the good side," I am focused on the detrimental actor. I think that demands our attention and our response first and foremost. That does not rule out everything else, but I'm also cautious about making assumptions about how a beneficial would be able to benefit us, right? Because in all of these channeled alien messages about a beneficial visitation and, do they describe how they will help the world without causing war and having to annihilate the part of the human population that resists receiving what they want to do? Right. How they would not have to take up a position of habitation in this planet to enact these policies? Like, do they describe that? Because if not, it's an implausible message. They're making massive promises with no coherent plan as to how that affect would come into the world. And often these messages talk about, well, first this evil force in the world, or this bad, Illuminati force, government force has to be removed. Oh, removed. So we're talking about removing people violently, I presume. I mean, come on now. So we have to mature in our response to these potential messages. They are potentially messages. They may not be accurate, is the thing. How do we determine if they are accurate? I think to some degree we can. We have to engage those capabilities. To some degree we can't. And, there is a scenario where we basically say, you know what, time out, remove and reset. We need all non-human entities to remove themselves physically from the world so that we can form the necessary treaties, governing bodies, agreements between nation states about how to collectively engage, and then we will re-engage. Now, if a non-human entity is unwilling to do that, that's a flag. That means they've already taken up a position, they have an interest and a stake, and they are not willing to give us the space as a species to formulate our plan, our intent for engaging life beyond our world. So, these are some of the things that we're going to be running up against in the next few years as more comes out about this force and what it's done and what government has done with it. It's going to be messy, but it's going to provoke these kinds of conversations. Be very important.
Love it, man. I love that state of thinking there, man. It's just real. It's real talk there, and I really appreciate that.
I'm just thinking like every person can think, really. I mean, I'm not an academic. I don't work in government.
See, the thing is, there's a battle between, like, the way you've broken it down. There's a battle because you want to trust an experiencer, and so you listen to the stories of an experiencer, but they're just telling what they've been told. They haven't fleshed it out on a level that we're talking about here, which I think is a very important tool now for experiencers and other people who receive messages from these extraterrestrials to go into have this different sort of logical thinking on what's being told to them before they relay that information to someone else. And that's just an awesome thing. But it does concern me on this level. And I'll ask you this before we get to audience questions, because I had thought about, okay, the way that these extraterrestrials interact, and they've been seen in many cases visiting schools and contacting children, right? So now with this sort of thinking, if you're processing it in this way, that doesn't seem actually like a great thing to be happening at this point. It's threatening almost. Yeah.
I mean, it could be. There's the possibility of threat is undeniable. So anyone who says it's impossible, they're not credible. What degree of threat we need to determine. Yes, but until we do, these unsanctioned engagements with human beings are concerning at the minimum, and in some cases alarming. You asked me earlier, do I feel, cautious, or am I more reserved in how I go out into the world? Well, take a look at the missing persons, missing 411 connection, David Paulides. Think about that before you go camping in nature. I do, right? I mean, because that's the environment we're in. It's almost like you go out on the internet and you go to websites and there's all these ads and click here and download this. And if you don't understand the environment you're in, you're going to get hacked, right? You're going to download something. They're going to extract your data. They're going to hold you hostage for money, etc. Like, that's the environment digitally. We need to understand the Earth-based environment now. And if we are not counting NHI at all, or we're thinking they're neutral or simply in an observational stance remote from our planet, think again. That's not the case. I don't think we need to be in a state of fear about it, but caution and concern, absolutely. And I think we need to get down the road of understanding the true NHI human interface as it has historically occurred.
And I've said that exactly. I'm glad you explained it that way, because I've said, yeah, okay, would I take that trip through the desert? I probably still would, but it'd be good to have the information prior to me making the decision, right? I at least should have the information so I can make an educated decision on if I'm gonna go. There may be some risk involved in it. Okay, I may be willing to accept that and still take the trip. And same thing with people going out to the forest, because you have Bigfoot and other things. I'm just like, okay, it'd be good for people to know, hey, there's the risk of that. And then, hey, you can still choose to go, but at least have that, because some people may choose, say, you know what, I'm not, it's not worth it. I'm not going to go. right? And just at least having that choice there. So I appreciate that, man. As we jump into, we got a few questions here. I got Super Crazy Movie Geek asking you, do you think humans could defeat a malevolent higher intelligence like in Independence Day?
Well, there's a thought experiment I don't entertain very often. I don't think this is anything like Independence Day. Again, I think this missiles and mayhem kind of human framing of a malevolent or hostile presence is just not, it's not what's happening, right? But that does not reverse conclude that they're here for our benefit. So we have to go to what we can observe. So, like, if I may frame it in that light, Lou Elizondo, he talks about the 5 observables of UAP. Well, one thing I'm talking about is the 5 observables of NHI. I think we need to go a little bit deeper beyond the shiny thing in the sky to look at the complete kind of force composition in our world, and what are they doing that we can observe. Secrecy and covert operation, number 1. Non-disclosure of intent, number 2. Divisive engagements, for example, with defense entities around the world. 4. Non-consensual contact, non-free will based contact with individuals. And then 5. Psychic manipulation. Okay, so 5 observables. So to go to the question, do you think humans could defeat that? Absolutely, easily. I mean, we are numerically superior to exponential levels than them, I would presume. I don't think there are 7.5 billion of them here. Okay, we control the ground, right? They may control the sky temporarily, but a little bit of human awareness, eyes on the sky, iPhones pointed up, right? Governments with the permission to do things that they could not otherwise do in a state of public ignorance, right? To potentially obstruct the operation of these craft in the sky. This is going to change the operating conditions, which presently favor any force of any intent, but most certainly one of a detrimental intent. So this kind of like frontiersman reality that we have that benefits their covert operation, I think that needs to end. We cannot have covert operation by undisclosed, unidentified entities who are interacting with individual human beings in unsanctioned ways. You just think about it, folks. I mean, think like the human being that you are. If we allow that to happen for another 80 years, we might not be the same human species. This matters. So I think, can we fight it? I don't even know if fighting it is what we would do. I think awareness and attention, change the operating conditions, have the conversations globally, and require NHI to abide by our rules of engagement. That looks within our grasp.
I like that. And Kim Jellin, to go off the 80-year thing there, Kim Jellin asks, Reed seems the only 80 years of NHI. Why?
Oh, great question. So yeah, I mean, we get into the ancient contact and, the possibility of perpetual contact. I do not believe that we are being contacted for the very first time in the last 80 years. I think there is a qualitative and quantitatively distinct visitation taking place in the 20th century. I think contact likely happened at other points in time, maybe for millions of years, right? But we do not see in the historical record evidence of a visitation like this, engaging with people like this. And as you go back into ancient history, the veracity of the records declines, the number of them declines, the utility of them declines. I mean, there's one thing about looking at a biblical passage and wondering about it. There's another thing about detecting craft in the neighborhoods of American cities. So we actually have capabilities to detect that. We don't have great capabilities to know what was said on a mountaintop 2,000 years ago by one entity to another. So it's not that it didn't happen, it's that the utility is lower. And fundamentally, we have to deal with the force that's here. I think there will be time over time to consider all possibilities regarding, again, origins, etc. But there are too many vulnerabilities to open up that aperture all the way and allow potential NHI narratives to pass right in. Because look, all they need to say, all they need to do is make an undeniable physical presence in the world that can, captured, seen by thousands or millions of people, captured on video, photo, sensor data, etc. It's undeniable. They're here. and say the following thing: we are the gods in your scriptures. We are the angels who have come in the past, and we have come again. Now, they say that. What percentage of humanity believes it instantly? A pretty sizable slice. Is that a problem? Potentially. Can we verify the claim that they just made going back to the Bible or other scriptures or cave art? No, we cannot. And so it's unverifiable. And it demands our immediate acceptance. And many people would give that over. And so, look at the variables at play here. It's a high vulnerability, high consequence situation. But yes, I think in time we will need to understand the true history of non-human interactions with our world. I do look at the cryptoterrestrial theory, the ultra-terrestrial theory, extratemporal, future humans, all of that. So I'm not in a state of saying that's all wrong. I am saying I believe, after everything I've looked at, that there is an extraterrestrial, non-human force present in our world. And interdimensionality, fascinating, theoretical. And if we're going to start claiming that those in our world today, all of them, are theoretical beings from a theoretical space, when there is physical craft, there are biologics, there are humanoid encounters. I mean, come on, folks. It's like we have to deal with what we can deal with and not escape dealing with it and avoid confronting or contending with the reality of it and escape into the theoretical fringes of all possibilities. Is there a transdimensional component to them or their capability? That's different. Both of those, being and capability, I think possibly, yes. Are they still in our dimension, having physical effects on people? Yes. So we still have to deal with it in our dimension. And so, ultimately, we need a response framework more than an understanding framework. The scientific method, beautiful, the gold standard. Data is God, right? But ultimately, we have to respond. And so we might need more of an intelligence framework to do that. And here's where I like the phrase reconnaissance, which is science in service to reconnaissance. Like, we need science to help us know what to do on appropriate timescales and at appropriate levels of human action, global action. But to get back to the question, I do think this is a unique event in the history of our civilization. It is a 20th century visitation. I don't doubt that the long tail of that curve goes way into the 1800s, 1700s, 1500s, and beyond. I don't doubt that at all. I think the observation could be many hundreds of years running, but the intervention is not. The intervention is 20th century. And I think we should look at what happened in the 20th century, because understanding that is indicative of why they might have been motivated to come.
Awesome answer there. And I have you pretty much answered Jay Truthseeker's question. I'll just bring it up because he put it in there. He said, do you think a UFO disclosure could reveal and bring about the real truth of religious origins? And you touched on that. So I'll move to the next question, which is Angels Are Life. Nikki saying, so what are your view of hybrids, human ET hybrids? And we got about 1 minute left.
1 minute to talk about hybrids. Wow. Here's my elevator pitch. I almost shook hands with Donald Rumsfeld and asked him in person once. So here's my elevator pitch from 20 years later. I think there is strong indications that there is a human hybridization program. I think the abduction phenomenon is connected to it. I think it makes sense for them to come and use the infrastructure and the genetic infrastructure that we humans have developed for their ends. Makes total sense. Why bring it all here when it's already here and can be used to develop what they need? Maybe they need a specific type of human with psychic abilities and allegiance to non-human interests to operate or function in some role.
Okay. I want to make sure that you get to tell everybody where they could find you, because we'll have to go right into commercial. So
okay.
Yeah.
Yep. You can find me, reedsummers.com. You can find me on Twitter, reedsummers7. Working on a book, working on launching my own show as well. So stay tuned, and I hope to unpack all of this extensively and have more of these conversations. So thank you.
Reed, I appreciate you coming in, man. I knew this would be awesome. I knew it'd probably go over 2 hours. I would definitely love to reach back out to you and continue the conversation. We can actually even take it different paths. I think you're an asset to the overall conversation, so we got to do this again.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate you hosting it. There's got to be a host for the conversation to happen.
Appreciate that. Everybody, thanks for your questions. This has been Reed Summers giving us some awesome information. You guys don't go anywhere. We're going to be jumping into hour number 3 as we go into the debrief of this conversation. Reed, you have a good rest of your night.
Conversations that move the
You're
needle.
listening to After Hours with Mr. Rob G on the only place where you can own the night. Spaced Out Radio.
Spaced Out Radio.
You've tuned your dial to the right frequency.
All right, see you guys in a couple of minutes here. 5 minutes. right, everyone. Welcome back to Spaced Out Radio. After hour number 3, as we, give thanks to our awesome guest, Reed Summers. I knew it was going to be an awesome conversation. I told you guys leading up to this show for the last few weeks that I couldn't wait for this one. And it was everything that I thought it would be. Shout out to Reed Summers. I will be sending him some information so we can schedule the next appearance, because we got to continue this conversation. And I think it's so important. Thanks for coming back to Spaced Out Radio after hour number 3 with me, your host, Mr. Rob G. As we go ahead and get ready to jump back into the show, we got Drew Banky joining us for hour 3 for the wrap up. We also got Steve Stockton, Missing Person Mysteries, and then maybe a little unapologetically Mr. Rob G. I have a couple things I just want to talk about. Space Travelers, don't forget, you can actually join the Space Travelers Club for as little as $5 per month by joining our Patreon. As we go ahead and get ready to listen to the guy who tells some of the best stories out there, Steve Stockton, and no shade to Swamp Dweller, because he's awesome as well, equally awesome. But let's go ahead and see what Steve Stockton has for us tonight. Let's go.
Welcome to Tales Untold and Missing Persons Mysteries on Spaced Out Radio's After Hours. My name is Steve Stockton, and I'm here to take you on a journey of mysteries, legends, and true stories. Come, join me on this strange adventure of Tales Untold and Missing Person Mysteries. This is an account of what allegedly happened to a woman named Anne Jeffries. Anne was born in 1626 and passed away in 1698. There was a wealthy neighboring family named the Pitts who employed Anne as a domestic servant and were able and willing to verify all of Anne's accounts and claimed witness to some as well. Now let's travel back in time and hear the remarkable stories of Anne's encounters. Now the documentation of these encounters came from a man named Moses Pitt, who wrote it all down and sent it to one Reverend Dr. Edward Fowler, who was the Bishop of Gloucester at the time of the strange occurrences. Moses was seeking the Reverend's advice on the matter. Let's hear what he has to say. In 1645, when Anne was just 19 years old, is when the unusual experiences are said to have started. Anne secured a job as a domestic servant for the wealthy Pitt family and started working in their home. While it's unclear exactly how long she'd been working for them at the time of this first encounter, we know it wasn't very long after she started. One morning, after Anne had finished up all her household chores, she went outside and sat in the garden of the huge estate home. Anne claims that, while sitting there silently, taking in the nice weather and relaxing on the comfortable arbor there in the backyard of that home, she heard someone or something in the woods very close to her. She said it sounded like someone was walking very lightly towards her. She first thought maybe it was one of the family members or maybe just a visitor to the home. She quickly disregarded this thought, however, when she began to hear strange ringing sounds, seemingly coming from every direction around her all at once. Although scared, Anne recalled that the day was so bright and beautiful, she also felt as though nothing could harm her. Also, she reasoned, there were people all around her, in the front of the house and inside as well. Many witnesses, if you will. While the ringing was still going on, very loudly, and while Anne was trying to get her bearings, 6 small men, dressed all in green, suddenly appeared out of nowhere from the bright and sunny woods nearby. She described them as cute and charming looking, with big eyes and tiny little legs. She later started referring to them as fairies. Now, there's no information as to what made her use this particular title for a description, or what made her think this is what these little men in green were. Anne also claimed that upon laying her eyes on the men, she had become paralyzed or frozen in place, and after a minute or two, she noticed a slight change in her environment before it changed altogether, and she saw the little men had brought her to what she called a castle in the sky. It is here where Anne claimed that these men had relations with her. The Pitt family verified that Anne did in fact go missing for that entire day, and though they searched far and wide, they never could locate her. Anne reappeared on her own, though, groggy, laying disheveled and in the fetal position on the lawn in the front yard. Anne kept quiet about her encounter for fear of being called insane or possibly even losing her job. However, she started speaking out and telling people her tale when she claims the little men, or fairies, started to return to her on occasion. This became her torment, and she started opening up to one member of the Pitt family about her ordeal. Unfortunately for Anne, she placed her trust in the wrong family member because shortly after confessing what was troubling her, recounting her tale of little men dressed in green doing those things to her in a castle in the sky, this person reported her to the local authorities, and in short order, Anne was arrested and charged with witchcraft. She was even sent to jail for it. A piece of mail, written by the mayor of this small town where all this is said to have occurred, has been kept and preserved throughout history and can now be found in the Clarendon Manuscripts Archives. This document not only contains verification that Anne was held for quite some time in the jail, there's also a small portion that seems to back up her claim that the little men were in fact still coming to visit. It states how, despite being starved for several months, Anne never got sick and didn't ever seem to be starving or even hungry, as though someone were bringing her food regularly. Anne herself later confirmed this suspicion by telling Moses Pitt how the fairies did in fact feed her by bringing her unusual bread. However, the explanation as to what exactly she meant by unusual bread is either lost in time or never was. Obviously, this could have been very helpful to proving her innocence of not practicing witchcraft, especially back in the late 1600s. For whatever reason, Anne was eventually released from prison and the charges against her were dropped. She moved on with her life and eventually married a laborer named William Warren. She would later state, when pursuing a new career in nursing, that she wasn't sure how or why it had happened, why they had chosen her, but that the fairies had given her a wealth of knowledge in the medical and nursing fields, and she wanted desperately to use it to help others. And she eventually did become a nurse. In 1693, Moses Pitt, who had remained friends with Anne, though after she was accused in jail for witchcraft he did so in secret, decided to send a journalist friend of his named Humphrey Martin to interview Anne about all of her strange encounters and dealings with these little men dressed all in green. However, at that point, Anne didn't want to talk about it anymore for fear of what might happen to her if word got out again. She was quite comfortable and happy in her married life to William and her nursing career, and didn't care to revisit the alleged torment she went through, not only in jail, but in the Sky Castle. Humphrey Martin wrote to Moses Pitt in response saying, "As for Anne Jeffries, I have been with her the greater part of one day, and did read to her all that you wrote to me, but she would not own anything of it. As concerning the fairies or any of the cures that she could perform, I asked her the reason why she would not do it. She replied that if she would discover it to you, that you would make books and ballads of it, and she said that she would not have her name spread about the country in books and ballads of such thing." Now, at the time all this was happening with Anne in the mid to late 17th century, the belief in fairies was very widespread and actually quite common, though almost always kept in secret for fear of being jailed and labeled a witch, like Anne. There were many reports of similar things happening to many different people all over the world. These castle in the sky encounters were the most common. While this is almost always related to a totally different type of abduction nowadays, it was always related to the Fae then. Continuing, I think it would be completely remiss of us to be speaking of the fairies and not mention the origin of fairy tales. Now, according to Wikipedia, the oral tradition of the fairy tale came along before the written page. Tales were told, retold, and enacted dramatically, whether about fairies or not. These tales were then told and passed down from generation to generation. Mystical and magical happenings and beings seem to be more a part of the fairy tale itself than actual fairies being included in such stories. The first written collections which attempted to preserve not only the theme and characters told in such tales were by the Brothers Grimm. While they had to later rewrite all the tales to make them more acceptable and also more profitable, due to the original content having mostly sexual overtones and not being child-friendly at all, any kind of talking animal, grotesque goblin, troll, beast, or monster can be considered a fairy tale. Also, tales of warning, meant to keep young children in line by telling of strange and horrible and unfortunate things that have allegedly happened to other children who, for instance, didn't eat their vegetables or clean their rooms. Those kids who didn't brush their teeth and told lies. There's always a lesson to be learned in these tales. Take them for what they're worth to you. While this is just the beginning of the vast information about a few different tales and legends of fairies, we've only begun to scratch the surface. Now, I'll leave you with some lesser known information that may be helpful should you ever encounter one or maybe even a few of these little people. Know that while the above stories seem to show a more benevolent side to these fairy legends, which in modern times have been Disneyfied, they are often known to be much more evil and complicated to pin down from one country to another in real life.
And that is Steve Stockton, Missing Person Mysteries, Tales Untold. Just another awesome account from Steve Stockton. Like I always say, man, he has a voice. He could read you a manuscript. He could read you anything. He could read your text messages, and they're going to come across and sound really spooky and creepy. Shout out to Steve Stockton for giving us this gem to drop on the Spaced Out Radio After Hours radio show. And we're going to go ahead and jump into the next part of the show here, which is the After Hours wrap up. And, you know, this is when we bring in our guy, Drew Banky, to kind of debrief on the conversation that happened today. So here we go. Let's jump into it. Yes, ominous intro for the guy of the hour, Mr. Drew Banky, coming in with the After Hours wrap up. Drew, how you been, buddy? Muted.
Been doing great, man. Just real busy, you know, just lots of things going on, and yeah, all exciting things. So
Good
yeah,
stuff.
I was in the background listening to the whole thing, and it sounded man, I thought I would have a lot more to talk about, but I don't, you know. I agree with a lot of it, you know. And
Very good way of thinking, right? Just a different way of, you know, using logical thinking to kind of approach the conversation. And I think there was so much value there in a lot of the stuff that he said, and just a way to look at it, you know, thinking about, and it kind of took me back right towards the end there where we talked about potentially like the message that abductees might be getting from these ETs could be essentially disinformation, could be, you know, what they want the populace to hear from these abductees. And as the abductee, you're telling your truth, you're speaking your truth, and you're speaking what was conveyed to you. But it could be some sort of overarching plan to kind of desensitize and kind of lull everyone into like a state of acceptance and go along and essentially with whatever the agenda is, man. Thinking about it like that, what do you think?
No, I agree. I mean, it could be, you know, who knows? But ultimately, I go back to what I've said before. Like, they're a highly advanced species. If they're a separate species, that's the thing. I don't think it's a separate species. I believe in the whole timeline thing. I think they're us in the future. You know, so I think it's family. You know, going back to native belief, but we can agree that they're highly advanced. You know, we've seen their craft in the airspace. You know, the Tic Tac videos and all the other accounts. You know, all the other stuff out there. We're seeing and have mass proof of their excuse me of their craft operating well outside the range of our technology. We can all agree upon that. So if they are here, like, we have to, you know, we're gonna have to try to make friends with them if they are something separate. But I believe in the whole spirituality evolution thing, and I love the overall label that Reed put on it is the intervention, and I totally believe in that. You know, I, my take on it, my take on the intervention may be a little bit different, but ultimately it's intervention. You know.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that was a great term to use as well. And just kind of, because we could theorize intent all day, just saying, hey, maybe they're doing this, maybe they're doing that, they're here for this, here for that. But more so just looking at the provable things, like the tangible things, and kind of deducing intent based off of what has been shown and what we know, right? And I think that is actually a great way to go about it, because yeah, we could spitball, we could talk about maybe they're here to help, maybe they're here to invade, maybe those are things we could throw. But where are we applying nuts and bolts facts to the making a decision like that, or a determination like that, right? And I think that's, even for myself, because I like to think these things through, and I'll go down a theoretical path all day, and I'll do that and go in different directions with different theories. But yeah, when we're sitting down, because the whole goal, obviously, when we do sit down and have these conversations, is to have a conversation that moves the needle. And so, getting toward, moving the conversation forward, and trying to deduce, what we can almost consider as facts, or at least very plausible things, based off of uh you know based off of actions and non-actions of these things as they're here. So I thought that was really, like, it opened my mind up to a whole different, and it made me look at things a little differently, because you know thinking about the whole, and I've always thought, okay, and I've always asked, an experiencer, like, hey, how do we not know at the end of the day that there isn't some sort of deception being played when it comes to messages that you may get from these extraterrestrials? How do we know that they're giving you the actual data that you should be telling everyone else? I've always said that, but then looking at it in a way, as far as this, truthfully, this may be a whole disinformation thing that's going on, and they're just telling you what they want you to tell everyone else, which takes that thought a little further and makes it more realistic in maybe what that actual intent is behind contacting certain people. And then when I asked them at the end, because it kind of made me think about the whole school contact thing, like, okay, there, you could think, if you're going down a path of just thought thinking, you could go down a path to say, okay, they see kids as pure un non-suppressed entities, and maybe they're trying to deliver messages to the most pure of our species. But then if it's a whole misinformation thing going on, then you have to, it changes that whole prospect of them contacting our children,
Sure.
in those ways. And it kind of just, but it's how we should be thinking on both sides of that. And that's kind of
Sure.
really what the exercise is to not discount one thing over the other, but then also to look at the plausibility of here to help. And then also maybe the intent isn't so great, right?
Sure. Have you ever heard of like infant swimming and stuff like that? Starting kids off like as infants swimming, before like 6 months or a year old or whatever. Have you ever heard of that? Have you ever seen or heard of anything like that, of them just throwing kids in the water, as infants, and then they naturally
Oh
swim?
yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. So what about a 5-year-old that's never swim, and you throw them in a pool? They're drowned. You throw an infant in a pool, they're swim. Think about that. That they're more adaptable to the environment, where
Right.
they're at.
Right.
As we get older and more ingrained in this by watching social media, news, and movies, and all the inputs and everything, we get so ingrained in our ego, we get stuck in the thought process of everything has to check all these boxes. But what we're going into right now, I think we can all agree upon, there's a lot of these boxes that we're going to have to leave to move forward. You know, there's things that are just not going to be part of the reality anymore. You know, and I truly, honestly, deeply think that we're going to leave the whole hierarchy part and separateness part behind as we move forward into interstellar being.
I will say this. I will say that, I've talked to Dave about this many a times. Shout out to Dave Scott. I love you, man. I love you, man. But,
I'm
you
eating
know,
pancakes.
yeah,
Pancakes
we're,
right
we're
now.
definitely eating breakfast for dinner because that's what we do here at Space Out Radio. We eat breakfast for dinner. So you got to just deal with it, Dave. But also, what you got to deal with, Dave, is that, because Dave is the no threat narrative. There is no threat narrative. And I just thinking, just using common sense would have to tell you that there may not be a visible threat narrative, but there isn't a visible non-threat narrative either. It's more like neutral as far as taking a look at it. It's just being hoping for the best, preparing for the worst as we step into trying to figure out what's going on, or as we go through these steps here. And it's just makes more sense to look at it from both sides, because once again, there's people who go on a plane and commercial flight and have no idea that these things exist, and that these objects are buzzing planes and things of that nature. And it's like, how would you rather find out, or would you rather at least have the notion in your mind that something could happen because these things fly so close to planes? Would you rather figure that out on the ground, or would you rather figure that out at 35,000 feet in the air? Because if we go down that rabbit hole, there's people that believe that, like the MH370 we talked about the other day, like that may have gone down or been interacted with by extraterrestrials. We know there's other cases of pilots who have reported seeing things and then disappearing forever at that point. So it's just
Yeah.
having the knowledge, and then kind of being able to disseminate or make a decision based off of looking at all the variables and saying, hey, okay, that may not be the case here. However, let me at least think that through so I can then make an educated judgment on how I want to proceed. And every person should have the right to do that. And every person should be approaching situations like that, especially when you don't understand what's going on. Like if I see, if you never heard of a lion before, are you going to just walk up and pet it and assume that you could pet this thing? It has huge teeth. It has huge claws. It's a huge animal. You pet a cat, you know what I mean? So would you naturally assume you could go and walk up to this lion and pet this lion, right? Chances are you should hope for the best. Maybe it'll be a nice one and you can pet it and get away. But you got to hope for the worst, because it is something that could negatively impact you and potentially take you out of here. And, just like he said, there's, as we get ready to go to break, there's, you know, to say that these things have been here all this time and they haven't done anything to us yet just shows that you have in the back of your mind that they could do something to you, so that your understanding of the fact that they may possess the ability to do something to you, which is scary enough in itself, just knowing, okay, the ability is there, and it's really about if they choose to act on that or not, right? And it's just smart, I would think, to be prepared for the worst. I mean, there's so many different scenarios that you can give when it pertains to that. But what we're going to do is we're going to end up continuing this conversation on the other side of this break, because we actually have to go to break right now, and we got our guy Drew Banky right here joining us with the After Hours wrap up. Like I said, it's been an awesome show. I just want to once again give a shout out to Reed Summer, because I've been talking about this interview for the last few weeks, literally, and just counting down the days that we could have this conversation. So, Reed, if you are out there, sir, I am reaching back out so we can continue this, because I know there's a lot more great stuff to talk about. And for everybody else out there, you guys don't go anywhere, because we are about to finish up this conversation and then get into some Unapologetically Mr. Rob G. just got a couple things on my mind. So you guys kick back, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right here on the Spaced Out Radio After Hours Radio Show with me, your host, Mr. Rob G. Getting it in once again. Yes, we are clear. We are clear. Yes, Drew Benke. Awesome conversation on spirit horses the other night, man. Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff, dude. Everybody responded to that. Everybody, felt good about that conversation. I mean, you dropped some good information on that as well, man.
Yeah, it felt good. It felt good for sure. It's horses are really near and dear to my heart always, so felt good to talk about it.
Yeah, and it's just like I said during that show, it's like, looking at when people have pets that passed in general conversation with just a person who, may not even be a believer, but knows that they saw the spirit of their pet. They usually look at it as, okay, this is comforting. My pet is trying to reach out to me and let me know that he's okay or she's okay, and they're waiting for me, to come to that other side so that we can be back together. So, and that's a great way to look at it. But at the same time, when you add the extra symbolism behind that, it goes deeper. It goes deeper than that. And horses, amongst other animals that have been talked about by Native Americans in the spirit world, usually have a purpose on guiding you somewhere, or I guess guiding is the best way to put it, right? Guiding you on the journey, spiritual journey.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I would say. That's what it's all about.
Yeah,
I think I think all the spirits, ultimate, mission is to guide us. So, in different ways, like we were talking about, depending on what the animal or what the essence is, it contains a different message. So
it's always amazing to kind of, whenever your eyes get open to other things, to when you're able to see another perspective, the way that it impacts you and allows you to see things or do things going forward from that point. And I'll just go to the conversation that was had tonight. Is just like, it's another one of those times where a different perspective or outlook or a way to approach something kind of just opens you up to look at the same things you've been looking at this whole time, but in a different light, and it adds to your ability to it adds your ability to kind of sort things out and to grasp the whole meaning behind something that may be going on. So that's why I love to have these conversations, man. Get your brain going. And I'm one of those people that believe that you have to exercise your mind. And that's kind of when I look at these conversations to be like almost exercise for your mind. You know what I mean? So I enjoy it thoroughly.
Yeah, I'm glad to be part of it. I love, man, this is my jam.
This your jam. And you are Drew Benke, as I can see by the thing on your microphone right there. You're obviously Drew Benke. You wouldn't have that if you weren't Drew Benke.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
you got to make sure to go follow Drew, man. Drew has a lot of awesome stuff going on. Most recently was on the Ian Bick podcast. So if you guys haven't watched him on the Ian Bick podcast, you got to go check it out. Great interview there.
Blow it up. It's just about at 9K on the YouTube. You can listen to it anywhere. It's on Apple, Spotify, everywhere. But it's got some videos that are on knocking on the door, going viral. So check them out everywhere, and give it some love. I appreciate it.
And then we're gonna do hashtag Drew Benke on Rogan. That's gonna be the new hashtag that we're gonna put on social media. Drew Benke on Rogan, because we gotta get you there, man. That day I'm gonna get my popcorn. I'm gonna get my brewski, and I'm gonna sit back and be like, man, there you go. There you go.
The I can't talk about it very deeply, but the avenue is open. Like there is a line that's that has opened up. So stay tuned. Yeah.
We will. That's a good way to kind of leave it. Yeah. Just know that anything that goes on, any developments there, you'll definitely be hearing here during hour 3. So make sure you come back, and if you're not here to just see the after hour show, make sure you're here to see Drew Banky in hour number 3 as we do the wrap up. And it'll probably be the wrap up guy. Normally he's here on Sunday, but you notice he's here on Saturday. So I don't know what that means. It may mean something here, but we'll see. We'll see. All right, 10 seconds when we come back for radio here. All right, everybody, welcome back to Spaced Out Radio. We are on the back end of the show here after hour 2.5 as we come back with Drew Banky, who's doing the air guitar in the background. And we go ahead and get ready to finish up the wrap up and then maybe get into some unapologetically, Mr. Rob G, and talk about a couple things. Space travelers, once again, for the last time, you guys can actually travel space, join the club, Spaced Out Radio Space Travelers Club, for as little as $5 buckaroonies per month. Consider doing that as we get back into it. So once again, we're having a great conversation with Reed earlier this evening. And if you missed any of this, if you're just joining us now, you can hop into our archives, youtube.com/@spacedoutradio, and catch what you missed. Because here on the After Hours Radio Show, we have conversations that move the needle. And this was another one of those tonight. And we got some good stuff coming up for the next few weeks as well. So make sure you guys hit the notification bell and stay tuned, because we are going to go there. Yes. So getting back into it, were there any other things that stood out to you during that conversation? I guess we can get into.
When he was talking, I just wasn't expecting him talking about this is the point of us moving forward, because that's my stance too. Like a lot of stuff we aligned on, like almost like all of it really, and the idea is that we don't know what it is. Who can argue with that? Like we were aligned on all of it. But when he was talking about like we're at the the prefaces, or the doorway, or the portal that we're moving into a different stage of existence for our species, I think that's true. But I think to take a step further, I think that there is no difference between the two species. I just think that we're looking at us in the advanced future, which, well, what would we look like in the future if we're moving into this consciousness evolutionary stage, which I think he spoke on right at the beginning, which kind of grabbed my attention. I was like, okay, like we could set the table and have a dinner conversation, So I think I agreed with pretty much everything he said. I think we're here at the stage. We all can agree that something big is about to happen. What's it gonna be? Like, there's a lot of people talking about a mass contact event. I've talked about a mass contact event before that I've had dreams about. Like, that would change everything. If flotillas, massive flotillas uncloaked all around the world at once, undeniable presence, landed, come down, shook our hands, took us on board and showed us that we were related, or took us on board and showed us that we were all slaves this time, or whatever, or unveiled, or just let us know what the truth is. Like, I think a lot of us doing Gare right now. We just want to know what the hell's going on. Like, it doesn't matter what it is.
And here's what I'll say to that. Just like you said, you can sit down at the table and have the conversation. And that I'll say that to say, because at the beginning of the show, before we came on, I'm like, Drew, I know you stand on the love and light side of this conversation, and it's going to be interesting to see your outlook on the conversation. And here we are, and you say you align with basically everything you said, and that was good because it was done in a way that should be logical. Like at least it should be open-minded enough of an approach for both sides of that conversation to get something out of what was said. And I think that's kind of what you're espousing there when you say that, which I think is pretty cool. Another thing that he said that I was looking at and I was like, wow, was the whole disclosure part of this. When it talks about, would you want to know, like, what the information for disclosure is? Like, would you want to know the reason why? Are you even thinking of the reasons why that the intent of them being here? What if it's something that you hear that goes totally against what you thought was going to be the case here? And it's like, man, okay, looking at it like that makes a lot of sense as well. Like, are you prepared to get that sort of information? Like, they may say they're here to eat us all. They may say they're here to farm us. They may hear to say, they're here taking us because of X, Y, and Z, and it may not be what you thought in the beginning. So I thought that was pretty awesome as well.
I think, from my perspective, I think it's, I would say it's kind of ignorant to look at the government for our disclosure. I think we've talked about this before, and I think a lot of us are in the same alignment. Like, we've known that the government has lied to us all about all these programs, about all these tracking UFOs and all this stuff for all this time. And now we're in this like cycle that we think we need to look at the government for disclosure, and we need to look, we can't trust it unless it comes from them, but they've proven time and time again that they've lied to us. And that's a paradigm where we're in this victim mentality where, like, okay, we know you lied to us, but we still want the government whistleblowers. Like, I'm not throwing any shade at any particular person. I'm just saying in general, the public, gives so much credence and credit to ex-government officials when it's been proven that the government's been lying to us all this time. Like, it's a weird paradigm that I see, and I don't understand. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Am I starting a podcast war right now?
No, you're good. I mean, here's the thing: you got to speak your truth, and you got to, regardless on how it may come across to someone else. I mean, you're speaking your truth, and that's what it's all about. That's why we should always have people from all sides of the conversation in the audience tuning in, because there's going to be some people that agree with you. There are going to be some people that disagree with you, and that's just how it is. That's how you have a fruitful conversation and continue to move this thing forward. But as far as the government goes, that's why I always ask questions. I ask just to get different perspectives and different insights on how a particular person might be looking at this question. I may ask the same question to a few different guests because I want to know their actual perspective on that question. That way I'm able to sit and take all these different responses and kind of formulate, see if it aligns with things I'm thinking or if it gives me a new way of thinking. But with that being said, the government, and I call it like Stockholm syndrome, and that's the only way I can explain it when it comes to the group of people that are out there that feel like they just have to hear information from the government, like it has to come from them, and it's not valid if it doesn't. And I call it like mommy daddy syndrome. Like, if mommy daddy don't tell you, then you won't believe it, right? And that's kind of the thing. And some people are locked into that. And I guess the best thing I could deduce that down to is that some people are just followers and some are not, right? Some people just, okay, you're the leader, so I'm going to listen to every word you say and I'll go ahead and go with it. There's unfortunately some people, as we talked, who did we talk to about the Matrix? Somebody recently, I can't remember, but we talked about being stuck in the Matrix. It was Geraldine Orozco. and being unplugging from the matrix. And there's just a group of people, and it's sad because when I look around, there are people that will not be able to break the hive mentality. They won't be able to step out and think on their own, and they're just okay with being plugged into the matrix and doing the daily chores that society gives them, and they're just content with that, and they'll never have a moment where they have that awakening time where they step outside and be like, you know what, something's wrong with this. They'll just continue to go with that until the end. And that's why I've always tried to come up with ways to kind of break that trance, right? Because when I talked a few weeks ago about the whole societal structure, as far as someone handing you a $2 million check at the age of 18 and saying, hey, work for me for the next 40 years in exchange for this. When I said that to somebody who was technically in a trance and locked into this society, when they heard that immediately woke them up. Boom. They were like, whoa, that makes so much sense. And now I'm upset. And now I see it from that perspective. I'm like, wow, that was actually pretty powerful. But unfortunately, if we don't have ways to wake people up in that way, you're just going to have people that are in that machine that are just content with being in that machine, and they'll just stay in that trance until the day they're no longer here. And that's what our governments want. They want that to be the case. I
really believe that.
They don't want us to wake up.
I really believe that. They've demonized psychedelics, they demonized consciousness and called it witchcraft, and for so long, and made so many programs, even intertwined it into cartoons and to our school system and everything, demonizing this all the time, all the while in the background they're experimenting with it and they're using it against it for other countries and stuff, and these secret programs and spy programs, and now we're starting to find out about it. So I mean, man, they've lied to us about so much. Like what makes you think they would not continue to lie to us?
Here's the bigger picture of that. Here's the add to that. Once you're reached that awakened state and you're able to sit back and look at society from the outside, you really understand that it's a game. It's literally a game. It's like Monopoly. There's money involved, paper money that holds a value when you're playing the game, just like Monopoly. We sit down right now, break out the board, and I'm taking Boardwalk every time. I'm taking Park Place, right? I'm taking those things, claiming those properties.
I like the railroads. I like getting the railroads. That's my thing. Like I get the railroads.
I got a stack of money like this, right? And I'm living the life. I'm that guy when we're playing Monopoly. But as soon as we fold the board up and put it in the box, none of that matters anymore. That's an analogy for stepping outside of society, putting away that game of Monopoly. That money no longer matters anymore. It doesn't hold any value. And just that's kind of where we have to go with the society in order to process disclosure and kind of go down that path. We have to step away from the Monopoly game, put it back in the box, and then see it for what it is. It's a game that we're going to put on the shelf. Politics, they're just playing dress up, unconsequential things that we give value to because we pay attention to it or we allow it to be a thing. But all that stuff is dress up, even down to our sports teams. They're just putting on costumes and getting out there and playing a game that is only important because we put the importance on it. But if we stepped away from the game and didn't pay it any attention, it'd be just some guys putting on costumes and running around for a little bit, right? And when you look at it like that, you kind of are able to step outside of that bubble. And it's just so important for people to at some point be able to do that because, if as long as we stay enthralled or enveloped in that, then we will never see reality for what it is or even understand what our potential could be because we're so limited within the structure that we allow ourselves to sit in. And that could be a whole show on itself. That could go deep, but and it just shows we can go to, and that's why I can't wait to get Reed back because there's some other things. When you have your initial conversation, there's things you want to touch in that first conversation. I think we did that, but it's always the second, third, fourth interviews, the ones after that, where you could explore so much more, right? So
For sure.
hopefully we get them back. And I know you're a thinker in that way too. So it's cool to be able to debrief or wrap up with you after having a conversation like that, man. So
Yeah, I appreciate it.
awesome stuff, Drew Banky. So we're gonna go ahead and get ready to wrap this thing up. I'm getting ready to do this other segment here. So, Drew, appreciate you coming on in. We're gonna do this again tomorrow and wrap up tomorrow's show. Everybody, give it up for Mr. Drew Banky joining
Much
us.
love, everybody. I appreciate it.
And talk to you very soon, man.
All right.
All right, later. All right, guys. Drew Banky. That's Drew Banky with the After Hours wrap up. Awesome wrap up as well. Because we got about 10 minutes left in this show. I mean, there was a conversation that came across my message line from a viewer out there, and she knows who she is. And I just wanted to go ahead and kind of jump into that. So we'll do like a quick 2, 3, 4 minute unapologetically Mr. Rob G, and we'll use the news intro to bring us into that. So here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent and horrifying news story. But I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
Yes, and this is unapologetically Mr. Rob G for tonight. And everyone's already been talking about this, right? So I'm looking around social media, and I see a lot of the skeptics having a celebration, going all out to point out the fact that the UAPDA, the UAP Disclosure Act, didn't make it. That it's getting the kibosh. And for me, it doesn't affect me, right? Just based on the conversation we just had with Drew Banky there. That I don't think that's important. Is it important as far as the political part of this? If you want political disclosure, if you're hoping that then leads to them uncovering some information that they're going to give us, I think we can all uniformly agree that disclosure likely isn't going to come from that source. So if that's the case, then does it really matter if the UAP Disclosure Act gets passed or not? And I guess that's a question for everybody out there, because I didn't feel any kind of way about it. I wasn't upset about it. I didn't, when I saw skeptics out there slam dunking on the fact that this was the case, I expected this. I expected exactly what we got there. And I think Dave even kind of elaborated on that the other day, stating that he pretty much predicted that. And anything related to politics and disclosure is usually going to end the same way. So I think that's pretty easy to predict. So I'm going to make a prediction right now. Is the government going to disclose any information within our lifetime? If we leave it up to them, my prediction is no. And I think we could all probably make that same prediction, which is why it ends up being very important that we all as humanity continue to do what it is that we're doing. We did hashtag receipts last time we talked, and it's just more of that. It's more of leaning back on us. We have to, just like we talked about the mommy daddy syndrome, where there's a portion of people that just feel like the information has to come from the government or it's not true. I think I pointed out, when you sit this side by side, you look at government disclosure versus humanity-led disclosure, and then look at the data sets on both sides. The only thing that the government-led disclosure, the only thing they have that we don't have is they have craft and bodies, right? Which is a big thing, right? But at the same time, I think on the humanity side of this, we have enough experiences, we have enough accounts, we have enough photos, we have enough videos that we could pretty much solidify the fact that we are not alone, right? And then it just takes us further. Once we've realized that, which, if we were more vocal about it, because we get together at places like this, where, you know, we're just on the internet though, right? We're on the internet. We're in radio land out there listening. But how many of us are actually getting up off our couches or getting up off our armchairs and going out there to kind of make sure the message gets spread? Like, we're depending on news outlets, we're depending on key figures within ufology to spread the word as we sit back and watch from the sidelines, right? And I think you know, the next step in what we need to do is we need to take action. For those of us that can, right? For those of us that can get out there, the example I always point to is there was the podcaster Dan, I can't remember his last name. He was in the spotlight for a moment. You'll know who I'm talking about. He actually is a podcaster from, I think, Tennessee, and he took it upon himself to drive out to some of those initial hearings out in DC, stood in line to make sure that he was in the building to be able to ask a question to one of the Congress people, right? So he took it the next step further. He could have stayed at home. He could have complained from his couch, but he actually took a step to be proactive in getting the message out there. And I think if a lot more of us did that, if we took the data that we had and we went on the road with this data and we went out to spread the word, that's how we could bring disclosure. Would we need some help? Sure. There's more and more social media influencers, and I pointed this out to someone as well. There are people coming out, you know, a lot of celebrities and stars that have huge followings that are now coming out saying, you know, bringing up aliens and bringing up the fact that maybe they've had an encounter. You know, there's the a guy named CC Homie, right? He was on No Jumper, which is far from a UFO podcast, but he was on there talking about how he was a bodyguard, or he was asked to be a bodyguard for someone who told him that he needed to be protected from the government for you know, some secrets that he had in regards to alien technology. So the whole point of that is that if we could reach out to influencers or get influencers on the team as part of this effort of everyone getting up off the couch and getting out there and spreading the fact that we have enough evidence for disclosure, then maybe we get some things happening instead of waiting for Ross Coulthard or Jeremy Corbell to drop a video, or you know, or for to see if Congress is going to accept or this iteration of the UAP DA. If we spent more time being proactive, I think disclosure would happen and we would actually move the needle like we are trying to do. So with that being said, let's focus on doing that, right? Wherever you can, if you can get out and spread the word, let's do it. We have the data. We have the data to back it up. So let's get out there and do what we can. And I vow to do the same. You know, with my channel over there, Social Dig, one of the whole reasons that I'm doing memberships and things over there is so that there's funding for me to get out there and not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. But with that being said, that was the Mr. Rob G, unapologetically Mr. Rob G. We're going to go ahead and get ready to wrap up this show. I definitely want to thank everybody for coming in. I want to thank our guest tonight, Reed Summers, because I think the conversation really moved the needle. I want to thank Drew Banky for coming in for the After Hours wrap-up. I want to thank Steve Stockton for coming in with Missing Person Mysteries, Tales Untold. And also, I want to thank the guy that you hear right there playing, Mr. Ron Bubblefoot Thal. He's the man rocking us out each and every weekend as he reminds us to never say never again. Because, yes, the phenomena is real. And anything and everything because of that is possible. Show your love for the show tonight by putting your horns up and also hitting that like button. Also, we want to thank all our viewers online and listeners on terrestrial radio and digital platforms all around the world. Whenever and wherever in the world you may be listening from. We appreciate you for tuning your frequency to Spaced Out Radio, where we do what we do best. And what's that, you ask? Yeah, we own the night. Remember, this show is copyright of Spaced Out Radio and SOR Media Ventures Limited. It's been a pleasure serving you once again as your host. I'm Mr. Rob G. This is the After Hours Radio Show. And to all you space travelers, this is not a goodbye nor farewell. However, as we go off air for the night, you can bet and best believe that we will see you next time. Much love to everybody out there. Take care. And let's continue to move this needle. Later. All right. Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff as we end the podcast side of that. And the radio show, awesome show, guys. Thanks for participating and having awesome questions for our guest tonight, Reed Summers. Like I said, once again, we want to thank him for coming in. And I'm going to reach out because we got to schedule him for the next conversation. And I also put out on Facebook, if you guys saw, we're looking for new guests as well. So if you have anybody in mind that you haven't seen on the show before, preferably, then please go ahead and respond to that post. And I'll definitely get on it, and we'll be reaching out to the people that you guys want to hear from, because that's what's very important. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get up out of here because we have a late night call-in show to do over at the Social Dig. So make sure you guys go ahead and go over there. We're going to start it in about 30 minutes from here. Let me go ahead and get a drink of water. Outside of that, you guys have a great rest of your night. See you over there at the Social Dig. You guys take care.
Cause we want retribution. Oh yeah, we want retribution. Oh yeah, we want retribution.